Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Placerville Town Hall. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting for February 26th to order. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, and good evening. Glad to see that you were able to make it out on such a stormy night. We'll take that as a good sign that the roads are still passable at this point. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Clerk.
Here.
Councilmember Borelli.
Here.
Vice Mayor Saragosa.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3.1, brief comments by the City Council. And I'll start on my left this evening. Vice Mayor Saragosa, do you have any announcements this evening?
Just had a great meeting with Terry Lamonchek with the El Dorado Arts Council. Just talking about all the great things that they're doing, and it was a great meeting. Thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Thomas, good evening.
Good evening. I had a meeting with City Council member Steve Hansen from the City of Sacramento. And I basically asked him to give me all his input and thoughts on homelessness and what they're doing in Sacramento. And what I found out is we don't have enough money to do it. But no, I say that half-heartedly. The reality is that it takes there's a lot more to come, a lot more to do. And by getting this $2 million grant, that's just the tip of the iceberg if we really want to move this ball down the field. So, and I don't know that it has to all be that way, and there's a lot more. He gave me a lot of reading what he did, and so I haven't had a chance to go through all that. And it's possible, and we're going to do our best from what we can here. And I think it's my intention to work really hard with the county to get them, as they are what I consider to be a higher responsible party than the city in taking care of this issue. So that's kind of my takeaway from that.
Thank you. Councilmember Taylor, good evening. Any comments?
No comments tonight.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Borelli.
I attended the Placerville Fire Safe Council meeting, and they had it up at Eschaton, and it was well attended. Tons of questions, and the new council board, they're still organizing, but everybody's full of all kinds of great ideas and high hopes and everything, and so it's very, very interesting, and it was a good meeting. And then I also attended the Greater Sacramento Economic Council meeting that they had. That was really, they had a great panel, very interesting. Some of you know and have met Barry Broom. He pretty much conducted, it was all about the economy and what he feels as though we should do. And it all boils down to there's power in numbers, and we need to join forces and not try to do it on our own.
He's really good.
He's very dynamic.
Yeah.
He doesn't mince any words about how he feels. And then I attended the kickoff meeting for the Amgen tour. So,
Yes. And when is Amgen coming through town?
May. Oh God, I wrote it down. Now I've lost it. Cleve, help.
It's on a Monday. Around 11 o'clock.
It is Monday, May 13th.
May 13th.
May 13th. And we really are far more organized than we're representing right now. It's a tremendous effort.
Yeah, we are.
Taking up the team that helped last year, which was very successful. Councilmember Borelli was involved in that also. So, we got great accolades from a number of the Amgen folks. So we hope to raise that same level of appreciation and participation
I
again.
think they're giving us a little more this year.
They're watching us more closely.
They are.
So we look forward to having the community involved in that. Patty, did you happen to notice when the next meeting will be for the Fire Safe Council?
Yes, it's March 21st, and it will be at Eschaton.
At Eschaton, so that's March 21st. And what time was that meeting?
At 5:30?
5:30, March 21st at Eschaton for the Placerville Fire Safe Council.
Great.
Well, thank you for attending that. And they have really brought a much-needed infusion of energy and organization and new volunteers to a despite the soggy evening, we're going to have real challenges come this summer, and this is going to be a group that's going to bring a lot of new interest to this much-needed topic. So thank you for
And
going to
then
all that stuff,
there's
Patty.
There's another at the Board of Supervisors, March 11th, 9:30 to 11:30.
For the Fire
For
Safe
the
Council?
fires, and let's see, I had another, and then the Fire Safe Council meets on the third Wednesday of each month at 9:30 at the Forest, where the Forest Service is on Brew Road. And they meet them there. So lots of meetings going on, lots of interest, and we're going to get something done.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
The meeting on March 11th, I believe, Patty, at the Board of Supervisors, that's their vegetation management expanded stakeholders meeting that the county has been operating. So that's what that meeting is on March
Okay.
11th. So I've been attending those.
Thank you both for your information. I'll just briefly thank again our public works crews. Since Nick came on board as the interim director, we have had nothing but challenges, and him and his crews have risen to the cause. They've had snowstorms, ice storms, and everything in between, falling trees on Cedar Ravine at an unfortunate regularity, and our crew has been out there under his leadership, keeping the city operating. So we certainly appreciate your dedication, and they're learning to plow snow very efficiently now. So undoubtedly it won't snow now for 5 more years. But seriously, thank you guys for all the hours that they put in. The interrupted weekends and the long nights is greatly appreciated by everybody. So I will move on to item 3.2, which is the ever-growing famous Mosquito Highway 50 Caltrans Mosquito Road Bridge Deck Replacement Project. And just to inform the community, there will be a stakeholders meeting that's being organized by the El Dorado County Transportation Commission under the authority of Woodrow and his staff on March 4th. That will involve city representatives, CAL FIRE Police, Highway Patrol, Caltrans, of course, will be there. And we hope to engage a whole number of community stakeholders to give their input on this project. And this is the 12-day project on Highway 50 that will reduce the traffic lanes to 1 in each direction with an anticipated 1-hour travel time through Placerville. Caltrans has let out that their first and preferred schedule is to do this project beginning in April 1st and completing it on April 12th. Their backup secondary construction dates right now are April 22nd through May 3rd. So we will find out more next week when we have our stakeholder meeting, and we will continue to do our best to keep our entire community informed on this Caltrans project as they go about repairing the bridge at Highway 50 and Mosquito Road. So moving on to item 3.3, review and provide input on the October 14th, 2019 power shutoff and the effects on the city of Placerville. Mr. Morris, good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you recall, last October 14th, PG&E implemented a power shutdown due to fire safety. We've, as you recall, we sent a resolution to PG&E condemning that action as due to the effects that it had on especially our downtown area, but other areas throughout, other businesses and residents throughout the area, due to the fact that we didn't feel that should have met the criteria for the shutdown. So the council sent that resolution last fall in October. We, since that time, have been in discussions with PG&E and have invited them to come and make a presentation to the council so that we can have a brief discussion on this. So tonight we have Brandon Sanders from PG&E here with us. You have a presentation that he will go through, and then he is open to some questions that we can talk to him and discussion we can have at that time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon.
Thank you, Cleve. Good evening, Brandon. Welcome to Placerville. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Mayor Acuna, council members. Really appreciate this opportunity to come before you to address a number of items. The first to be our expanded community wildfire safety program, of which the public safety power shutoff protocol is a piece of that, a larger strategy. And of course, want to make myself available to hear your concerns and be an advocate for the city, going back to our leadership and seeing how we might smooth these things over off into the future. So, Mayor Acuna, as you requested, I did provide printouts of the slide deck. They are on the back table. I don't know that there's enough for everyone, but there's about 20 or so there.
All right, thank you.
And
Dave and Chief, can you pull up that presentation? Should be on there.
If I could ask the clerk to turn the lights down, please. We can.
And
Thank you very much.
In the interest of time, I won't belabor this too much, but there are some fairly key points that I think will inform that broader discussion around public safety power shutoff. So if we could take it to the top, I believe this is about halfway through or so. And if you were to go to the view drop down, you can choose the full
screen. Yeah,
full
go to
screen
view.
option.
Top left, go to view. There. And go to full screen.
I believe it's under
Right there.
Zoom.
One down. There you
Full
go.
screen.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Excellent. So again, Brandon Sanders, local public affairs, PG&E. I am essentially the liaison or conduit for communication and cooperation between cities and counties and Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Really appreciate the opportunity here today. So I'm going to talk somewhat quickly about the high-level items that we are implementing to address the growing threat of high-severity wildfire. The first of those is around monitoring intelligence. We have established a Wildfire Safety Operations Center in our San Francisco General Office. That center is operated 24/7, 365 by fire scientists, meteorologists, emergency preparedness and management experts, among others, in the electric and gas system. We are also doing a lot around expanding our network of weather stations, which I think will be something that pleases the council. I'll explain that in further detail, in addition to installing high-definition cameras in the most high-risk areas. Around new and enhanced safety measures, we are really being aggressive on vegetation management. We feel that that is an area of our operations where we have a lot of opportunity to de-risk the system and mitigate the risk of high-severity wildfire. Additionally, we are doing accelerated safety inspections. These would be in addition to our routine patrols of all circuits in the system. I'll touch on that briefly in future slides. We are disabling some automated equipment that, while it works great in the wintertime to limit the duration of power outages, there is a risk in the summertime if those automated systems do operate and a conductor linked to those pieces of equipment would fall. So disabling that equipment in this high fire season. And then as a last resort, and something that Placerville experienced last October, is the public safety power shutoff. Additionally, we're doing a lot around system hardening, looking at opportunities to replace uncoated conductor with coated tree wire in high fire risk areas, looking to replace wood poles with steel or cement poles, doing a lot around upgrading our infrastructure with a consideration for weather and terrain and climate influences, and also exploring the possibility of establishing what we're calling resilience zones, which would be a very specified local area where there might be a fire station, a gas station, a grocery store, a community hall, looking to explore the possibility of constructing a looped circuit with an interconnecting transformer that we could energize those essential services in the event of a large wildfire or a long duration power outage. Next slide, please. So as it relates to our visibility into the field, I know that last October there was some concern around the weather conditions. There were definitely damaging winds in the higher elevations of the county. There have been many comments from this particular area that the winds didn't materialize like they did up country. To mitigate that, we've established or installed 18 new weather stations in El Dorado County, all over the county. That information is available in real time to the general public at mesowest.utah.edu. So that's one critical area of improvement that we acted on immediately, and we've now made what we're seeing in terms of field conditions available to the entire customer base and service territory. So that, I think, is a positive development that will better inform our decisions off into the future. Additionally, we're looking to install high-definition cameras in high fire threat areas. Early sensing and early detection of fire starts is essential to effective suppression and management. That data is also available to the public at alertwildfire.org. We're looking to greatly enhance our vegetation management work, working closely with customers to come to a mutually agreeable approach to managing trees. This is one of the biggest threats to our system. We're being very aggressive on this, and we're looking for support not just from our local government partners, but also our customers, and really addressing this as one of the key risk factors in operating the electric system. You're going to see a lot more vegetation management crews in the field in the months ahead. Briefly on the inspections that we're doing, in addition to our routine patrols, which we do on regular intervals, we have brought in contract resources with the latest in drone and digital imagery technology. We are inspecting about 50,000 transmission structures and 685,000 distribution structures this year, identifying opportunities for improvement, repair, making sure that we're doing everything we can to put eyes on each piece of equipment and make sure that we're addressing any issues there. It's actually pretty incredible watching those guys operate. This just touches a little more on the inspection work, everything from actually climbing the structures to using drones, and then of course in the more remote areas of the system, helicopters are the way to go just for efficiency's sake. As we identify needs for repairs or improvements from those inspections, we're acting on those immediately if there is an imminent risk. Otherwise, we're working with our local government partners to bundle that work so that we can streamline the permitting process, not just for us, but also help to alleviate some of the pressure on public works staff so that we're not coming at them with thousands of job packages on a one-by-one basis. We're looking to bundle that for efficiency. So briefly on the system hardening, again, we're looking to go back with when we do reconductoring or repairs with coated tree wire. That type of wire, while being a little heavier and a little more expensive, is actually much more resilient when coming into contact with vegetation. We're being aggressive on that, and that is a big piece of our system hardening, in addition to more fire-resistant materials like steel or concrete poles, and again, looking to pilot these resilience zones as a way to keep essential services flowing in the event of an emergency. We do have a mix of automated reclosing devices that are remotely operated and those that are analog or need to be turned on and off in the field. We are deactivating those manually activated devices in the high fire threat season. That is a great benefit to public safety. For those that are remotely operable out of our control center in Rockland, we are looking at real-time conditions and disabling those as necessary to mitigate the risk of wildfire. So speaking to the public safety power shutoff, there's been a lot of refinements since the first event last October. We have consulted with a lot of key people at varying levels of government and in various disciplines. The root factors we take into consideration now are defined on the screen above you. Of course, a red flag warning is kind of the baseline condition. That's something that's widely broadcast, through media outlets. That's sort of the starting point. And then we look to humidity. So if we're looking at humidity below 20%, that is a key indicator of high fire threat. We've established a range of forecasted sustained winds between 25 and 45 miles an hour. That's really kind of a baseline. There's a possibility that contributing factors like extreme low humidity or extreme low fuel moisture or extremely high burn indices could move that potentially. But that's really what we're looking at as our target for advancing on a public safety power shutoff event, in addition to fuel conditions, of course, and the observations from our crews in the field, which are quite significant. This is a map published by the California Public Utilities Commission showing the areas at highest risk for high severity damaging wildfire. Placerville is within both the Tier 2 and Tier 3 areas, kind of in that mid-elevation foothill band. So this is largely just to identify those communities, and it plays into public safety power shutoff in that we will look to de-energize lines within Tier 3 areas, but it's important to note that if a tier 3 area has a circuit traversing it that services a Tier 2 area or a Tier 1 area, there is still the potential for impacts to those residents or customers outside of the Tier 3 area because the source would be traversing high-risk landscape. So again, in the interest of refinement and continuous improvement, we have standardized our notification protocol. We will be doing 48 hours initial advance notice, and then at regular intervals ahead of that to all of our community partners. Last October, the focus was primarily on the county OES, and we were doing our best to provide them with updates, but we've come to realize that we need to cast a wider net. And so I personally, during the second event, which actually didn't materialize, that would have been just ahead of the campfire incident early November. I was convening conference calls at regular intervals throughout the day, each day, and casting a wide net to city, county, school districts, water districts. Everyone who might have an interest in the loss of power was included in those communications, and we did do check-ins at, I believe it was 8, noon, and 4, up until the decision was made to deactivate or de-escalate that potential event. So additionally, one of the contributing factors to the duration of those outages last October was the restoration process. So when we de-energize circuits, we essentially lose visibility into the system. So we need to get people on the ground, in trucks, on ATVs, in helicopters, inspecting each circuit span by span to ensure that that circuit is intact before we re-energize. The last thing we want to do is conduct a public safety power shutoff, have a failed conductor, and then re-energize the circuit prior to inspection, and then have that start a fire subsequently as a result. And so we have done some refinement to this in that instead of verifying the integrity of an entire circuit, we're looking for opportunities to do what we call step restoration, which would mean kind of sectionalizing circuits up to certain devices where we could, step by step, incrementally restore customers. And so that, I think, is going to play a big role in lessening the outage durations in future events. So the root message is PG&E has a plan and we're implementing it, and we really want our customers to have a plan as well. We're seeing fires of the scale and severity that we haven't seen historically. They're going to continue to happen. So we're doing everything we can to minimize risk, to mitigate the contributing factors to large-scale, highly damaging wildfire. And we're wanting to work with our communities to develop plans to put in place measures that will protect these communities in the event of this type of event. With that said, there are many resources on our website for customers to take a look at, guides on how they might prepare themselves and their families. Additionally, one thing I wanted to call out specifically are our medical baseline customers. These are our most sensitive customer population, individuals who require oxygen, those types of things. And so we have a very robust database, customer database, that clearly shows all of these individuals to us, and we have visibility into those that may be potentially affected. So we will be initiating contact with those individuals in the advance of a public safety power shutoff, and we will continue to attempt to do that until we can verify that they've received the message and have put plans in place accordingly. Additionally, what we're looking to do, and this is already starting to roll out in some of the other counties that were affected by the PSPS, like Lake and Sonoma, is issuing that customer data to emergency cooperators like OES, fire, law enforcement, even the cities and counties. But in order to do that, given that it's medically sensitive information, we're drafting and will make available to community partners a non-disclosure agreement. And we think that's going to be a good tool for emergency responders because they might have an idea of who in their community is medically sensitive, but we have very, very concise and detailed records on that. So that is going to be a benefit to our cooperating agencies in terms of having visibility into those who need services the most. So. With that concludes my slideshow. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Brandon. I think what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the council to direct any questions or comments to Brandon, and then we'll go ahead and see where that takes us. I'm thinking that it would be helpful to hear from any members of our audience if they would like to just express a comment or submit a question to us, rather than try and have you sit here and take a question and answer. I don't think that would be quite too appropriate. So, beginning, council questions, comments, concerns with PG&E's proposal for 2019 wildfires.
I'll go ahead and start off. Thank you, Brandon, for being here tonight. I appreciate that. Knowing what you know now, you're all right out there? Would there be anything different that you did in October versus if something were to happen, let's say next year?
Well, for me personally, I can definitely speak to me personally and then what we're doing as a company. So as your local representative and your supposed conduit for communication, I would be much more aggressive in doing outreach. I had been more or less focused on a few key cooperators. I now acknowledge that I should have spread that net far wider than I did initially, so I'll own that. So there's definitely going to be more and more frequent communication with our cooperating agencies. That's probably the biggest takeaway for me personally. That has also folded into sort of the more company-based strategy of communicating early and often. We do, as a company, have a group called our public safety specialists. These are largely retired CAL FIRE chiefs, retired sheriffs, those types of folks. We're drawing them in to play a more active role. They do already, but we're really going to lean on them because of their relationships in the emergency response community. So those folks are going to be brought in as key assets and really subject matter experts on these types of events. Definitely looking to refine some of our customer communications, make those a little more clear. And I think the biggest thing that will help not only inform us in our decision making, but help hold us accountable in the eyes of the public in the city is that we're publishing the weather data now that we're basing these decisions on. That's what publicly available. So that, I think, adds a level of transparency and accountability that I think will be beneficial for cities and counties moving forward.
I know you mentioned 18 new weather stations in El Dorado County. Do you know how many of those are in Placerville limits?
I have all the addresses on my computer. I can get those to Cleve, or I can read them off if you'd like right now.
No, you don't have to read them off,
Okay.
but it would be helpful to know how many are actually in Placerville. So I guess operationally, is there anything specific to Placerville that you can comment on? I know globally we've seen everything, and but is there anything specific to here or the Highway 50 corridor, or anything that you can kind of talk to specifically beyond the cutting trees back and hardening?
Yeah, definitely. So are you speaking specifically as it relates to the PSPS protocol or
Yes, and any other thing that you think might be beneficial for us to know, for the residents to know, for the city of Placerville specifically?
Yeah, so we're constantly looking to evolve and improve on this process. We have made a filing with the CPUC, essentially an after-action report. That did identify, I think, about 28 instances where, had we not de-energized circuits, there would have potentially been fire starts. So it works. That's documented. In terms of Placerville specifically, I do know that shortly after the event, there were some questions around placing devices in specific locations that might help to maybe lessen the expanse of an outage, or at least keep certain pockets of commerce here locally energized. Those are continuing to be looked at. I can't tell you with certainty what's going to be built and when, but we are actively reviewing that. We do acknowledge that the impacts were severe, especially as it relates to traffic. I would imagine, and I do believe that conversations are occurring with Caltrans as well, as it relates to the traffic signals. Mayor Acuna brought that forward quite rapidly to me, and I worked as best I could to get that addressed. But that is Caltrans equipment, and so we don't really have any right or authority to go in there and alter that or reconfigure it. So there's a need for some improvement there as well. So we've identified those types of things, and we continue to work on those. And I think as we get out of storm season and really can focus back on the day-to-day work, I think there will be opportunities for improvement.
Well, I think we definitely want to work with you on that. I mean, I didn't hear anything specific there, so I'd like to really drill down on what we can do to have some redundancy, so that whether it's these loop transfers or something that allows for areas that really weren't in any immediate danger, and if these new weather stations could help with that. But we simply have to do more than just say we're going to have talks. So
Sure, I fully respect that. One additional item that I did not speak to during my earlier comments on PSPS is that the original scope of that program was it included any circuit that was less than 70,000 volts. We have now made a filing with the CPUC as part of our wildfire safety plan, as required by SB 901, that we are now folding in the entire system essentially. And so as opposed to 800,000 potentially impacted customers, our entire customer base of 5.4 million accounts and about 17 million individuals could potentially be affected. And the reasoning for that is we are now folding into this program the large 500,000 volt circuits, which cross large landscapes and service large populations. And so again, this is as a last resort when the confluence of conditions are so severe and the risk is so high that we have no other choice but to de-energize. But so if anything, the scope has grown, but it doesn't mean that all 5 million customers are going to go down at once, right? That's highly unlikely. But
Well, thank you. I took the opportunity to look at the 87-page wildlife safety plan, and what I found lacking and disappointing was the lack of any real information about targeted hardening of underground. And we can replace poles till ad infinitum, but until we actually address putting stuff underground, we're going to continue to have these same issues. Can you talk at all, anything specifically when it comes to moving stuff underground?
Absolutely. I would love an opportunity to address that question because it's probably the most common question that we receive. And so undergrounding works great in certain situations, but there are a large number of considerations associated with that. So I'll start by speaking about undergrounding transmission circuits. So these are circuits that are extremely high voltage. They often cross mountainous terrain, forested areas, including federal lands. So the environmental challenges associated with putting trenches of that size across public lands are quite significant. But even that aside, and the actual cost of doing it aside, to underground a high voltage transmission circuit would require it to also have a parallel cooling system, an oil cooling system, which is highly complex. You know, those high voltage lines generate a lot of heat, and if they're just buried in conduit across a forested landscape, they wouldn't be able to sustain themselves. They would need to have an actual active oil cooling system along the entire right-of-way. So,
do any of your sister utilities currently do this?
I do believe that there is a small municipal utility in the wine country that has a very short run of that, but that's the only one that I'm aware of, and it is astronomically expensive. So that's on the transmission side. So looking at the distribution side, to underground a distribution circuit requires a lot of digging. And so, for example, if we were looking in a commercial area of Placerville and we wanted to underground, say, a distribution circuit along a 2-mile road, you're looking at very prolonged trenching operations, which would have long-term impacts to traffic flow, commerce from those fronting businesses. In addition, you run into things like environmental issues with soils and wetlands and wildlife, cultural and archaeological resources that might be present in the trench. So we look.
You realize we've done this with other utilities, though,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah, and that's not to say that we're not undergrounding. I'm just saying that these are all factors we take into consideration when we look at undergrounding projects.
Do you have any information on any undergrounding? Because you did mention targeted undergrounding in your first slide, but
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, generally, a city or county would be a proponent of an undergrounding project under the Rule 20A program, where the city or county would take receipt of.
do you have
funds.
anything specific?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's undergrounding going on all over the place. There's.
Do you have anything specific in El Dorado County?
Other than new subdivisions being built, I don't think that I would know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zaragoza. Councilmember Thomas, do you have any questions for Brandon in his presentation?
I appreciate all your comments, Michael. Probably the biggest thing that I'm curious about, and he hit on a lot of points I wanted to hit on, is the communication to customers. One of the biggest challenges that presented, I mean, a lot of people, you know, that I knew and talked to in my business and other businesses was we were given these astronomical, it's going to be 5 days, or it's going to be, we don't know. And the lack of information that was given to people, or inaccurate information, or angry people on the other line from PG&E who were tired of answering people's and them not liking the answers, was significant. And I think it really heightens the anxiety that people have in dealing with this issue in our community. And in educating people on what that looks like, and you know, I get that this is a whole new time and era where we're having to deal with this, but I don't get, you know, don't get that you I don't feel that you understand the impact to people in general in our community and what they're hearing from PG&E. And that's my only comment. I would like to see something done differently, and I didn't see that necessarily addressed. I saw a lot of talking about communicating with people. I hope that changes, and I hope that information is more accurate. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Councilmember Borelli.
Hey, Brian.
Hi.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate this pamphlet that you put in your program. That you, I kind of feel that I do feel that a lot of our issues, it seems to me that they have been addressed and are being addressed, and only time will tell. Horrible things happened, and unfortunately, I've said it over and over. Sometimes it takes a tragedy to make, for us to realize what went wrong and to try to fix it. One thing I wanted to ask you is, do you have a timeline on how long all this is going to take? Because in our at least in my estimation, this has to be done like yesterday. So, and I know that's impossible, but do you have some? And I also, along those lines, do you have an oversight committee? Is there somebody that you are beholden to? That, I mean, you're making all these, promises somewhat. Is there anybody that you're having to answer to?
Thank you, Councilmember Borelli. I'll answer the first question. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Timeline?
Yes, timeline. So it's all happening now. So we have our routine work. We'll take it in pieces. So the vegetation management piece, for example, we have routine work where we patrol circuits once, twice a year, identify hazardous vegetation and treat that. We're accelerating that. We have brought in pretty much every tree crew we can get our hands on to do that work. And so the tree work is happening. And it's
I know they've done a great job around where I live.
Okay, well, I appreciate the positive feedback. So the tree work is happening now. It's going to continue in an accelerated fashion, but at a safe and determined pace, of course. In terms of the inspection program, the additive inspection work, that's actually about halfway done, and we anticipate that being completed mid-year. And that's for the drone inspections of the lattice towers and the large transmission structures, and then the visual inspections of the distribution circuits. So that's ongoing and will be complete this year. We have targeted delivery timeframes on the weather stations of deploying 1,300 of those by 2022. And 600 of the high definition cameras by 2022. So there are timeframes established with that. There's also, the system hardening we take kind of on a project by project basis, right? So we can't just go out and replace everything all at once, but if there's a circuit that we had scheduled to replace or repair or remove or reconfigure, where we have this project work that's calendared and the funding for it is approved and all of those types of things, we'd be looking at those opportunities to harden. And as we go through the system, we touch every piece of equipment at regular intervals throughout the life cycle of that equipment. And eventually, decades maybe, but it's 120,000 miles of distribution circuit
Right,
and
right.
about 50,000 miles of transmission circuit.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
And then you asked about the oversight. So yes, we
I
have
did, yes.
we have several layers of oversight. The California Public Utilities Commission, of course, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, the legislature has taken a keen interest
Yes.
in PG&E and its operations. So there's definitely two very tangible oversight entities. Additionally, Governor Newsom convened a Wildfire Safety Commission that is largely focused on issues facing public investor-owned utilities like PG&E, and in addition to the overall threat of wildfire. There are others.
And bankruptcy court.
Yes, that too. And and for our hydroelectric facilities, for example, that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They have oversight over that. So there are several layers of oversight and accountability in place. And there's only going to be more, I believe.
I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Patty. Councilmember Taylor. Excuse me.
Yeah, so in regards to vegetation management, when I drive around the streets of Placerville, I see trees growing into telephone wires pretty much on every single road. And I'm really glad to hear that you've done a good job in Councilmember Borelli's neighborhood, but I haven't really seen crews out like downtown, on Canal Street, on Green Valley Road. So obviously time is of the essence. Fire season's only a couple months away, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about your timeline. I know you kind of touched on it, but I think power outages should really be a last resort.
Absolutely.
I think all of your customers and stakeholders and city managers and staff would rather see you doing the maintenance end instead of reacting by shutting off power. So what's your plan for vegetation management on just all the roads in Placerville?
Well, we do patrol every circuit at least once a year, if not twice. And so what that consists of is you likely see the trucks, the little trucks that say ACRT on the side of them. Those are our pre-inspectors. So they go along every circuit, put eyes on each span of wire, identify spans that need to be worked. Then essentially coming in behind them would be Davey Tree or Mountain Enterprises or any other number of tree contractors that we use. So it's continual. I'm very sensitive to your concerns about those specific roadways. If you can perhaps provide those to Cleve and have them send them to me, I can ask that those get inspected if they haven't already. I know that Councilmember Acuna has brought those forward to me before, so I'm happy to take that forward to the Veg Management Group. I thankfully have kind of a finger in every, or a hand in every cookie jar, if you will, so I have access to those folks, and I'm happy to carry that. But really, I kind of liken our vegetation management work as sort of like a wave that rolls over the community once or twice a year. Like if you imagine the community as a beach and a wave coming over it once or twice a year, because we do cover the entire system at regular intervals to do the veg management work. Part of it, it may seem as though there's trees somewhere where they shouldn't be, but really we have a standard, a legislated standard that we have to adhere to, and that's our focus. If we identify hazard trees outside of our right-of-way, then we would attempt to work with that customer to get approval for removal.
So what is that standard?
It's
The 4 feet?
It's the 4 feet radial clearance around the conductor, and we're looking to remove any overhanging limbs or branches. But additionally, and one thing that it's important for our customers to understand is that we would typically only enter a private property or work a roadside once or twice a year. So we don't want to be making multiple entries into private property, disturbing their ground, disturbing the residents. The cost implications are much less efficient in that way. So oftentimes, even though the standard is only 4 feet, we need to cut maybe 12 or 15 to accommodate for the growth rate of the tree over the course of a year in order to maintain compliance with the standard for the full year.
Okay. So would there be a way to have like an efficient way for people from the public to communicate areas that need to be inspected without bombarding you or you with a million different,
If I may?
Sure.
So on the very last slide, there's an email inbox at PG&E. It's wildfire safety at pge.com. And that is where we are compiling all of those types of things. And those are analyzed in real time. And if there's a need for immediate action, we will act.
So people from the public can
Absolutely.
email that email when
Absolutely.
they pass roads that have trees grown into lines?
Wildfire safety at pge.com.
Okay.
Or they can call the 800 number and report a hazard.
Okay. And then another comment I had was, in terms of communication, I'm glad to hear that you guys will be doing some different things with communication. But as a PG&E customer, when that outage happened, I got an alert that said power was going to be out. Like many people, I thought it was going to be for maybe a couple of hours, and it ended up being 22 hours. It went out around 10 o'clock. In the morning, I woke up and realized it was still out, went to the store to get dry ice, and there was already no dry ice or anything. So I think, making sure that people realize that it's not a couple hours, it's going to be out for 24 hours would alleviate some stress and let people plan better and, for services for the city and just for individuals and businesses.
Absolutely. That's great feedback, council member. And we have taken that into consideration. One example is El Dorado Irrigation District has, I think, 160 accounts, and they were getting so many automated notifications of the impending outage that it kind of sank their telecom a little bit. And so that's one example of where we found an opportunity for improvement. But additionally, providing better information earlier through those active customer outreach tools like the text messages or emails or phone calls. So that's very much a change factor that's being looked at for any future events. Definitely.
And aside from the public safety concerns on Highway 50 and communication between departments, there was real economic impact for the small businesses and businesses. I know grocery stores had to throw away over $100,000 worth of food. Restaurants couldn't open. So, that hasn't really been discussed, but it's a big deal. So definitely these outages should be an absolute last resort. It's kind of difficult for any of us to feel like last October's was the last resort because the wind was less than 15 miles an hour. So, just making sure that you're doing everything that you can on the front end so that we don't have to be having these outages.
Absolutely.
And I think that's all my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor.
Mayor, if you can indulge me, I just had
Okay.
maybe 2 more questions.
Sure.
On the PSPS, in terms of when you go through the category of things that have to happen before you initiate one, the sustained winds, what's the time frame for a sustained wind to actually, so that, is it 2 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours? I'm just wondering what constitutes a sustained wind pattern?
You know, I have to apologize, Mr. Zaragoza. I'm not entirely clear on what that duration has to be in order for it to be considered sustained. I can absolutely find out, though, and get back to you.
I think that would be great, because
Yeah.
it would help people to know, like, if you get a gust, you know, for 20 minutes,
Sure.
you know, is that going to trigger it, or is it, you know, from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and there's going to, you know,
I would
I think
ima-
that would have a better, I think everybody would benefit from that
That's an excellent question. I would imagine there's a standard for the meteorology community, but I just don't have it here, but I'll find out and get it to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And then lastly, in order to implement the wildlife safety plan, when you went to the PUC, how much did PG&E ask for in rate increase in order to fulfill that?
I don't believe there was any cost recovery associated with that.
All right, so there hasn't been any asked of a rate increase in order to mitigate what you're doing?
So there have been actions at the CPUC for cost recovery on a number of fire mitigation efforts. So for example, Governor Brown issued an emergency proclamation on tree mortality, and under the California Emergency Management Act, we have the ability to recover our costs for removing dead and dying trees. So that would be an example where we did seek cost recovery for veg work specific to that emergency declaration. And then in our general rate case process, there is absolutely safety funding called out in that, and that would include to fund efforts like these, I would assume, yeah. But I can research exactly what amounts are applied to what, if that
would be great.
if you'd like.
I appreciate it.
I can absolutely look into that.
Thank you.
And I would imagine there will be a general rate case in the not-too-distant future, and it would likely include some of these items as well. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Brandon, it's been very interesting to listen to PG&E's proposal. And first, let me say I thank you very much for all the help that you offered last year during this event, and that you've always done an excellent job, the best of your ability, to work between PG&E and the City of Placerville, and we do appreciate that. As I've sat here this evening and listened to the presentation, and then listened also to various comments and questions, it occurs to me that PG&E is now suddenly taking up the story that they've just discovered, that it's dangerous to have power lines running through anywhere, that power lines are dangerous. It sounds almost as if they're willing to accept operating at the level of a third world country. To bring the transmission system into this program will cause multi-millions of dollars in losses to any region that has to go through the restoration of what a transmission shutdown will take, because you will have lost control over an entire region. To think that that is an acceptable business practice when the company had decades of one of the highest standards of engineering, quality, and safety in the United States, and to see it at these current plans as seeing these as fixes is just very disheartening. I think PG&E finds itself as a result of years now of the failure to maintain poles, wires, and trimming trees, to having a very dangerous system that they have brought upon themselves. It's been almost an insult to me to watch Davy Tree in the last month very efficiently trim the circuit that runs along Cedar Ravine Road by my house. They trimmed that circuit as I was trained to do 30 or 40 years ago when I began my career in the electric utility industry. You trim down to the phone cable. If you don't, you lose your job. You can now fly an airplane through there. Before, PG&E's contract restriction was a few dollars per span. The tree companies were there trying to keep the trees down away from the line 2 or 3 times a year. Last month, Davy Tree finally was allowed to trim it correctly. No outages resulted now as because of that. So when I see what has happened, and to just kind of the tenor of this, Brandon, is like, well, gosh, it's dangerous. And now our only recourse is to shut everything off. How can you expect a community to accept that as a viable business operation when you come into all of our communities with, operating under the franchise agreements, operating under the agreements with the California Public Utilities Commission, and your obligation to provide safe service? That means you guys really should have been changing poles 10 years ago. Sadly, I know for a fact that there was one maintenance crew regularly assigned in Placerville. 10 years ago, there were 8. All 8 of those crews knew every inch of this county. And this, Brandon, this is not your issue. You were doing your job as a messenger for the company. But I know that we had hundreds of thousands of dollars in financial loss in October. PG&E's fire safety outage actually created a number of public safety and other service utility emergencies. This county was at gridlock, and for many days. The further you lived from a substation, the longer it took. There were people that were out of power for 2 and 3 days out in the Pleasant Valley area. And the thing that happens is they come to Placerville as their source. When they lose power, when they lose water, they can't pump water, they come to town to get gasoline, get groceries, to stock up, to survive the storms that we're going through right now. We serve as the regional hub when those kinds of events take place. And I shared this with you in October. People turned to Placerville. Parts of us were working and parts of us weren't, and it made absolutely no sense. So I look forward to working with you to encourage the company to not accept third world standards, to not shut off the transmission system. That is not an answer. That used to be the best maintained transmission system in the world at one time, built to the highest standards. Now, sadly, there are 100-year-old towers out there that apparently didn't make it on somebody's corporate bonus list, so they didn't get replaced. So there's a lot to answer for, and I don't think we can just shrug our shoulders and say, oh, we've decided that power lines as we maintain them right now aren't safe. Well, yeah, that's probably true because you have failed to maintain them. And so your company has a lot to answer for, and I hope that the fire safety outages that will probably occur this summer don't create unintended emergencies in those communities where they happen, because it certainly happened here last year, and it just will not be an acceptable way to operate a utility, in the United States in 2019. So I am a little at a quandary. I would like to let our members of our in the audience speak to this issue. It has been an agendized item. Brandon, I would ask you to please sit down, and we'll ask those folks to just address their comments to us. And again, I thank you for your job as the representative for the company. And I will go ahead and thank you very much. And we all have Brandon's information. We need to get a hold of him. Is there a member? I'm going to ask that you limit your comments to less than 3 minutes. If you would just to address the council, please come to the podium, state your name, and if you would like to tell us what part of the county you live in, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. Is there someone that would like to address the council on this item, PG&E's Power Safety Shutoff Program?
Is that okay?
And we will have our 3-minute clock running. Right,
My
thank
name
you.
is Francine Ayler. I live in Somerset, although I have a Placerville address. When our power was shut off, mandatory by PG&E, we have no water, no phone, we have nothing. We're stuck out there. If there's a fire started out there, no offense, we're gone. We don't have anything to survive out there because we are on a well of power. And also I have brought up, I have 2 transformers on my property. I have asked Andy the question of when were they checked last and could I get them checked? I was told by Andy, a PG&E supervisor, I guess, that it would cost me, well, they would check them, but it would cost me $500 to $800 if nothing was wrong with them. And so I said, who tells me nothing? Per transformer. Who tells me nothing's wrong with them? Well, PG&E does. I said, like I believe you guys, right? And so I asked if I could see the records. Could he tell me when they were last checked? Could I come see the records? He didn't know if they had any logs on them. So I said, can you let me know so I can go check when they were checked last? Because I don't remember PG&E being here checking them. He said, I will let you know. Guess what? To date, I have never got a call back from him. Also, I was wondering, I lost my train of thought.
Could you pull the microphone down just a little bit?
Sure.
There you go. Thank you.
Andy called and we'll look up logs and see if I can physically see them. We'll call back, no call back. I don't know when my transformers were checked. I have two, one on the top, one on the bottom part of my property. Why aren't they being checked? And if they're being checked, why can't they? I don't know how to use my computer, but I have a computer. So they should know how to use it and when they were checked, and I can go look and see when they were checked. Even if they lied to me, I'd have felt better up there. You know, I'm sorry, but I would have felt better that they, you know, when I call PG&E, nobody knows anything. Nobody, am I running out of
Nope,
time?
you're doing good. I'm sorry. We got to get this fixed so I can see what's going on.
Okay, nobody
Don't mean to
knows
be rude.
anything. Most of them are fairly nice, but Richard called me yesterday, and I know this is not concerning the fire safety, and I had reported two of the PG&E drinkers on Hanks Exchange and Pleasant Valley Road drinking beers, Corona, at their truck. He basically questioned me like I was a liar. And I said, would I call you? Would I call you? What were they drinking? Coronas, long. My daughter and my granddaughter both seen them. But due to the snow, they couldn't turn around. I said, and you're questioning me? You should be questioning them.
Thank
You
you
know,
for your
I-
comments.
Huh?
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate it.
You have
We
a great
understand
day.
the issues of living out in the country.
I know, I
Electricity
understand
is
that.
important.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Someone else wish to address the council?
Hi, my name is Kimberly McKinney, and I'm a Pollock resident. I've lived in the country my whole life. When we bought a home, we actually bought closer to fire departments, stores, that kind of thing, so we could get it in and out quickly, get to work. I noticed that the PG&E started turning off our, energy in September a lot. We went without power for 4 days. Some other residents were going on 9 days to 2 weeks that I understand up where I lived. We could get to work, so doesn't seem like it's an issue for their trucks. It seems like they're not maintaining stuff. As somebody that pays taxes, pays my bills, that kind of thing, I was really insulted when I called PG&E to get my smart meter taken off my home and told that it would cost me $75 to have them take a device that I didn't authorize be installed on my private property that was there before I bought it. I understand, but I still have to pay almost $100 to have it taken off. And then I have to pay monthly fees to have that off. That doesn't seem right to me. They're a monopoly. I don't have any other options for power. I did bring a generator home because I'm an asthmatic, and if they shut off my power, I could literally die if I have an asthma attack and I don't have access to my nebulizer and I'm snowed in. But my issue was more like the fact that I could get to work and they couldn't get to the polls for several days. To me as a customer, that doesn't seem like they're maintaining their lines. Sure West, when I lived in Sacramento, over 10 years ago, almost 20 years ago, had lines through the ground. So I understand that it's not a maintenance issue. It's a you're not worth it issue, but they're still connected to my house. So I guess my issue is like I called today about my food that I had to throw away in this last power outage because the last lady had mentioned the dry ice was all gone by the time we knew that we needed to get it. I was told by PG&E that within 3 days I'd have a phone call back regarding my claim. That was on the 13th, I believe, that I called. I called again today and was told that no, it's not that I missed their call. It's that they were so inundated with calls that they just hadn't called me back and hadn't followed up with me or anything. I find that absolutely ridiculous as a consumer, you know.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your comments. And before another person comes up, I want to just focus this a little bit more. Let's focus our comments on the fire safe program, the outage that we had last year, and the potential of what was presented this evening and how that might impact us. So it's, if there's someone who wishes to address the council, please come forward.
In October,
If you could just state your, guys.
I'm Joanne Ayler.
Hi, Joanne.
In October, my father was alive. He was a stroke patient on oxygen and paralyzed. I was dealing with him when we got the call. It was left on my machine. I called back, asked them how long, so I know if I have to take him to a family member's, and the lady on the phone basically said I should have been more prepared because the call was literally an hour before, and that I should make other arrangements. I said, okay, so how will I know? Who gets turned on first? When I brought my dad home, I did all the paperwork twice to make sure they knew we were medical. And I had medical equipment that needed to run 24/7. A lot of us don't have the money to, whenever it happens, not just to replace our groceries, but get my dad out of there. It took two of us, my mom can't do it, but me and my niece, who was not home at the time, and I was told I could call 911. That's not an emergency. It is, but it's not when there's so much more going on. I think that we need more time before it goes off so we can make these adjustments. I could have had my nephew come home while I could call him. When I don't have service, I don't have a phone unless I walk. Well, if you've ever taken care of, especially, not to be mean, a grumpy man, you can't leave, you know what I mean? And hope I get service down the road and hope nothing happens while I'm gone. Because my mom couldn't do it, she couldn't lift him, even for the restroom. You know, we were made to feel that we should have been more prepared when it was October.
A matter of communication then.
It wasn't
Yeah.
windy, we had nothing. You know, I think they need to, and put the medicals and the elderly in their thoughts when dealing with them.
Thank you. Does someone else wish to address the council on the fire safety outages from last October and as anticipated this year? Good evening.
My name is Tiffany Sanders. I am a Placerville resident. I actually live within the city bounds by the EID building. We were out of power last October for almost an entire 3 days. And I did call PG&E at the time, and the answer that I received about the grids was that I was able to look up a map that showed which part of the city was out of power, which part of the city had power. And we were literally like right on the border, and it rounded around. So Broadway was good, Main Street looked good, but our whole neighborhood was out, and everything north of that was out. And when I spoke to the representative, she didn't have any clear answers except to say, well, the grids are large, so you're on a grid that elsewhere is having turbulent winds, but you aren't. So your power is going to be out with that grid. So I'm just curious if there's a way we can have access to a grid map so people can also have some information as to where their residence lies within those grids. And then that can clear up kind of, okay, well, if power's out here, then if they say something's going on like 30 miles that way, I have an idea of where my power situation is going to be when that happens. Second of all, I'm curious with all the maintenance that was in the presentation that they're upping, so like the drones and the weather stations and the cameras, I assume that that is going to increase the burden of cost. And I know that that's going to be passed on to customers in one way or another. And I'm curious if there is a projection of the cost increase that customers can expect, if this is going to be a single fixed increase or if it's going to be a gradual increase over time, because cameras are IT systems. IT systems require updates, and any electronic system requires upgrades and maintenance. So these are issues that I would like to see at some point specifically addressed And if that information can be made accessible to the public, because it was not in the presentation, that would be valuable.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. And yours is a good example of 3 days on the edge of town. And hopefully in the very near future, PG&E can install a switch so that the part of town can stay energized and the dangerous wildland area can have the outage that it might really need. So is there someone else that would wish to address the council? Sue Rodman, I see you're about to approach the podium. Good evening, Sue.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. PG&E is undoubtedly the worst electric provider I have had in the 4 states where I have lived. Montana Power never left us without electricity more than 8 hours, and we were 15 miles from town, in the mountains, on a very rough old Forest Service logging road, in a small group of houses. 8 hours was the longest we were ever without power. And that was from a very, very nasty snowstorm. Idaho Power was also reliable and less expensive besides. Utah Power and Light had a similar record. SMUD runs lines through the same type of forest and brush terrain, and I've never heard of them starting a fire. I hope this time PG falls through on the promises in their little handout. But here's what I think about their proposal. Further enhancing vegetation management? Further enhancing? This is a main responsibility for any power company. You need more boots on the ground and less highly paid people in headquarters office who have never set a foot in the field. Do your job. Performing accelerated safety inspections in addition to our routine inspections? What do you mean? Apparently your routine inspections and maintenance programs are insufficient, and they need to be accelerated, and they need to stay accelerated. Disabling automatic reclosing of circuit breakers and reclosers on lines? I would have thought this would have been done at least 10 years ago. Where are you guys? Installing stronger and more resilient poles? This is another action that should have been in progress for at least the last 10 years, not waiting for the next 10 years. I thought it was in progress since you were caught using medium strength poles that were taken down by the snow in about 1990. Or at least since PG&E was found liable for the power fire. How many losses does it take? Replacing equipment? This sounds good, but what exactly are you doing that's not already in your handout? And as far as undergrounding power lines, I helped with a project to underground 28 miles of transmission line from Salt Springs Reservoir all the way to Kirkwood. So it is possible, and it wasn't a huge, big transmission line. It wasn't 500 kilowatts or anything, but it was a trench, and we did it, and it took 2 years, and it took 2 years to do the environmental, but it's done now. And so Kirkwood now runs on PG&E electricity instead of having to run on diesel generators. It can be done. It takes a little bit of will, and it takes a little bit of actually getting out there and do your damn job.
Thank you, Sue. Sue, can you hand your comments to the city clerk, please? Thank you. Someone else wish to address the council specifically on the fire safety outage from last year and the proposals for this year? Good evening, sir. If you could pull the microphone up.
Sure, Kirk Smith.
Thank you, Kirk.
And I just think that the jargon about de-energizing is very interesting. It's kind of like police saying the suspect exited the vehicle, meaning the guy got out of the car. When you talk about de-energizing, what you're talking about is cutting off the power that serves the homes and businesses of more than 10,000 people in this community alone. It's a very serious matter, and I'm not satisfied, Councilmember Morelli, with anything they said. Nothing. We got no assurances that this will not be repeated. For example, one of the most significant issues was the city didn't get advance notice. They got blindsided, both about when it was happened, when it was going to end. On the brochure that we were handing out, page 12, it talks about the kind of notice they're going to provide. If possible, based on conditions, we will provide notice in advance. That's nothing. So specific question is, what procedures are you going to use? Second, regarding what happened in October, what were the procedures you had then? You talked about humidity and you talked about wind. What was the written policies you had at the time? I'd actually like to see the copies. So among other things, we don't learn that this was not something done deliberately to help take the heat off of Paradise and let the public get the idea that they were between a rock and a hard place. So what were the criteria? What was the humidity factors you looked at? What was the wind you looked at? What are the specific policies you're going to use for the future? And what kind of notice are you going to give to law enforcement, CHP, and local police agencies when it comes to shut off the power? We had a major problem with stoplights all up and down Highway 50. So you're going to give notice that this could happen based on the humidity figures getting drier and drier? What are you going to do to make sure that police are able to streamline traffic? What about getting lights to intersections in the case of an exit situation where we need to evacuate the area? You haven't done that, and there was nothing mentioned about that whatsoever. We know that PG&E has a hotline number that we can all call if we're going to do any digging on a property, so that we know if there's an underground pipeline for gas. So do they have a number that you can call, just in consonance with what Councilmember Taylor was talking about, if you see a dangerous situation, if you see a power line, power pole with tree limbs nearby, or you see some insulators that look frayed, is there a hotline you can call? And if so, are you going to publicize that to make sure that everybody knows there's something they can do? Those are the kind of things I like. I know that recently the city considered an ordinance to update the vegetation management to help prevent forest fires and brush fires in this area. They've conveniently outlined for you the kind of ordinance that you can adopt for utilities in this community. They've told specific standards. They've written them for you. 12 feet on either side of a power line. Would they be, specific question, interested in accepting an ordinance that would require utility companies in this area to clean the vegetation around your poles? Lastly, if I may just quickly, up on Sacramento Street, they came up several years ago to clean the area near power lines. I would love to clean 100 linear feet of trees and limbs. I can't do it because the trees have grown up, woven between 3 rows, vertical rows of power. Can you imagine the liability on a property owner? You want us to clean our land of vegetation. We can't do it. I can't risk cutting those trees because they could fall on a power line or a utility line. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Someone else wish to address the council on the fire outage?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Marion Washburn, resident of Placerville. My comments are a little different than the angry comments, and rightly so, of other people. But what I'm involved in at the moment is the Fire Safe Count, the newly established Placerville Fire Safe Council, and its main thrust at the moment is trying to get a hold of vegetation management, and in the course of doing that, prioritizing areas around town that are the highest risk possible. So it's sort of a risk assessment. And as I listen to Brandon, it sounds like that work is kind of being done simultaneously by PG&E. So what I am wondering is there a way to have a spokesperson from PG&E communicate what they are learning out there in the field with the fire safe group? Because I can see different groups are trying to accomplish the same thing without knowing what the other one is doing, which sounds like that's a real way to not get things done very well. So I would certainly appreciate if there could be some spokesperson who could maybe share the maps of high concern with that citizen group of the Fire Safe Council. One other concern that I had is just reflective of my own street and neighborhood, that I know that PG&E came around and did some of the tree trimming sorts of things, but there's an awful lot of debris left on the ground from those operations that not all of it seems to wind up getting chipped, that it's laying there. So being a member of the Fire Safe Council, now I'm seeing, will the Fire Safe folks have to somehow get their arms around that and follow PG&E to clean up debris that they have created, which seems like there's a real exercise in redundancy in a sense. So it brings up another need for communication between the citizen group and PG&E to know what those mutual efforts are so that they can be coordinated and made more efficient. Thank you for your
Marion,
time.
can I ask you a question, please? Would you would be looking for not just this presentation, you would be looking for the contact person that would have the actual maps, the actual tree industry data, if you will,
Right.
of where they're engaging in their efforts right now.
That's what I was envisioning. When Brandon was talking about doing all the inspections that they're planning on doing, I assume that data is being collected and then inserted into electronic maps so that they could use it. But if the Fire Safe Council could have that available, it seems like their job would be certainly more to the end of being efficient and helpful.
Okay, let's see if we can't make that connection happen between PG&E's appropriate person and the Fire Safe Council.
Thank you. I think that would be enormously helpful.
In regards to the tree trimming, that debris in your neighborhood, was that earlier this year?
Yeah, it was maybe a month ago.
Month ago, yeah. Okay. There was
Recently.
Brandon, it was an out-of-state contract company, and they were doing a really sloppy job. But I was hoping that they were going to go back and clean up. Sounds like maybe they didn't. There's an awful lot of brush along Coleman and in that whole area.
Yep.
Okay.
And I would assume the Fire Safe group who is there to motivate residents and citizens to kind of take hold of their own areas, that kind of implies the understory rather than the higher limbs and that sort of thing. So it does seem destructive and counterproductive to have PG&E creating debris and the understory for citizens to clean up.
All right, thank you. And thank you for your work at the Fire Safe Council. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to address the council on this item?
Good evening. Edwin Lepper, resident of Placerville. I'm a little bit confused on when they're talking about the vegetation removal as far as what PG&E is going to be doing on their own for their own power lines. We recently had to take down some trees. We contacted PG&E. We were getting a new service put in. And also, the trees were growing around the line. And we consulted with them and were, hey, are you guys going to cut this down? It's around your it's along your lines. And in the end, we ended up having to take down the trees and cost me $1,100. And so I'm wondering going forward with like the county in general, is that they say they're going to be picking them up, but they're not. And it's just very confusing to me. And then, you look across the street and there's lines just inundated with trees. And so it doesn't seem like they're doing anything, pretty much. And then, as far as with the power outages, I feel like a lot of other people do as well, with like some accountability on PG&E's part. They are a monopoly. I have no other choice. But there's zero accountability that's happening as far as they're like, okay, well, we're just going to have to raise the prices to do this stuff we should have already been doing. And it seems like it's almost illegal. It's really terrible. And there's got to be some sort of accountability going on with that. It's just going to get passed down to me, but then there's still people within that organization making millions of dollars. And that just does not seem fair, and I have zero choice.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, sir.
Very noted. Is there anyone else? I'd like to... Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jason Roybal. I'm a resident of Camino. And I just had a quick comment, and that was basically a take-home for the gentleman from PG&E with regards to the notification system that they used for the last planned power outage. I remember being home that night and receiving 3 text messages before anything went out that were worded as such: high winds may cause a power outage. And I'm a system and software architect, so I'm kind of hyper literal, being an engineer. So I read those as, well, a drunk driver may cause a power outage by running into a pole. Our power was out for over a day, and we were part of the, my wife and I are both tech workers that work from home, and we were part of the refugees that eventually found internet down El Dorado Hills way and worked from Starbucks. And then I think it was about 6 hours after the power at our house came back on, I received a message saying, the power in your area will be turned off. But that was after the power had already been off and then came back on. So as the kind of person that gets consulted to build the systems that do these kinds of notifications and whatnot, I don't know if their SMS gateway or their SMS portal provider that they chose was just choked with traffic or what, but it's something, if they're moving forward with better communication for planned outages in the future, it definitely needs to be looked at as an entire system. And that's all I want to share.
Thank you very much for sharing that information. All right, seeing no one else approaching the podium, I will close public comment on this. First of all, let me thank everybody for coming this evening. A lot of you are have your Placerville addresses, but you live out in the country, like the way it works. And I certainly appreciate you spending the time on a stormy night to come. We appreciate Brandon and his presentation with the current plan that PG is going to bring forward for 2019. I would just say that for myself, and I'll speak for the city manager, we will continue to be in contact with Brandon, and we will continue to express our concerns back to the corporation, PG&E, to let them know that this is a very serious issue, and that one emergency is creating multiple other emergencies, and that we do serve as a hub for a whole lot more people than just the 10,000 residents that live in town. The irony of this thing, as Sue was making her comments, and she has a long and storied career with the Forest Service, is if for some reason PG&E was to elect to shut off the transmission facilities, the high voltage lines in El Dorado County, ironically, in the same corridor, the SMUD towers would remain energized during the very same wind event. SMUD has a 230,000 volt line that PG&E's 115,000 volt line runs along for many, many miles. So it will be very interesting to see and very hard to explain why SMUD was able to maintain their facilities in an operational condition while PG&E felt that it was necessary to shut theirs off. So we could, thank you very much, Sue, for pointing that out, because there was always a good competition between SMUD and PG&E, and we always try to do things right. Apparently they're one up on us on this one. Seriously, I hope PG&E is working very closely with CAL FIRE on this. They are the wildfire experts. You guys aren't. I'm sorry, you're not. For example, the Camp Fire, that particular fire, they had been predicting that fire for 70 or 80 years. That was their wintertime practice, to learn how to respond to a fire coming out of the Feather River Canyon, north wind driven into the town of Paradise. That's been on their radar since that organization was formed. Again, they're the fire experts. We may have a little breeze in Pleasant Valley, we may have a gale in Swansboro, but I hope PG&E can take a lot of information from CAL FIRE and hopefully tailor what they ultimately need to do. Last comment I'll make is, and it came again from CAL FIRE, they're really looking, and it's partly from what happened with last year with the fires and PG&E's outage, at really changing the public perception of the red flag warning. Right now, it doesn't get a lot of attention. It doesn't get what it needs. And they're taking the initiative to make a new public perception of what that really means, so that we can get more people's attention, and hopefully we'll reduce fires from all causes. So anyway, I appreciate everyone's time on this. I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and then the council will resume with the rest of the agenda. If everybody could please take their seat, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Now we have to move on to item 3.4, which I'm very happy to say is our annual crime report. And that information, of course, is going to be presented by no other than Chief Ortega. Good evening, Chief. I think we're all settled down.
All right, good evening, Mayor,
Please
City
go ahead.
Council. This is your annual crime report for the city, basically crime stats. It's a summary of where we are. This is just our staffing chart, which is just can be confusing. I'll just give you a summary here. We're still short 4 dispatch positions, and that's really about it. And we're doing some fill-in in dispatch now, and we have some active recruiting going on now. That's my biggest biggest staffing challenge. So in here, you'll see a summary of what are called the Part 1 crimes. I think everybody knows those are the major crimes that we report to the FBI every year. A couple of things to note. Under rape, you'll see that it shows that there were 6 reported last year and 6 reported in 2017, 10 reported in 2018. Of those 10, 7 were found to be unfounded through further investigation and interview of witnesses and victims. So the reports do show a jump, but it wasn't. After we dig into a little deeper to a lot of these crimes, that's what we find. Burglary, larceny, and theft, depending on the category. Larceny is just regular theft, and then there's auto theft. Remained basically even for the year. Burglaries and keep in mind this is reported burglaries showed down, and it looks like we had one more arson than the year before. The one other statistic that jumps out on this page is the aggravated assault. So aggravated assault is any crime that has a serious injury. I do know when I asked, because I saw that number and I'm like, wow, why is there so many? 7 of those 28 crimes from 2018 involved suspects that were transient in nature or identified themselves as transient with no home address within our community. That still leaves a lot of a jump, so we're going to dig a little bit into that moving forward. So this is crimes against person, which thankfully that first category, I don't even want to say the word because I've had a good record there. I explained the rapes, the robberies are even, the aggravated assaults I just went over. And then we move over to property crimes in the chart to your right. Burglaries are down. Larcenies, again, are just the regular thefts, appear to have jumped a little bit. And auto theft remains virtually even. And then this is a 5-year comparison for crimes against person. It's pretty self-explanatory. And again, that just shows over a 5-year trend. And then the property crimes of a 5-year comparison. Again, there's nothing here that jumps too far out. There are some concerns. Auto theft and simple theft and burglary are things that we try to work with our crime prevention message off Facebook and through other community interactions. Basically, we just ask people to lock their stuff up, please. That would really help us out. And then we started tracking, better tracking of calls for service involving transients, or subjects that identify themselves as transient after we have contacted them. And some are dispatched and some are officer initiated. And the officer initiated type contacts usually come in the form of going to parks after hours when our parks are closed, making sure that there's no campfires being built on either parks or any other open lands around the city. And this is our arrest statistics. Again, self-explanatory, blue being felony, red being misdemeanor arrests. There's no substantial jumps or decreases that grab my attention. A little bit of an increase in felony arrests, and keeping in mind that a lot of this is due to our ability to have proactive officers getting out of their cars and contacting individuals or vehicle stops. And this is the number of calls for service. We started breaking these down 2 years ago so that I could see, what I wanted to see was the number of calls that were called in by citizens versus the number of calls or contacts, self-initiated activity done by the officers. And as you can see, the numbers are down right now on both categories there. And this is always an interesting statistic for any jurisdiction. What day of the week has the most calls for service? And for whatever reason, it's Thursday. There's never an explanation for that. So whatever the bad guys are doing, they seem to favor Thursday, usually late afternoon or early evening.
Long week.
I don't know why. I don't have an explanation. It's just, that's one of those things in my career, just always find kind of comical. And other than that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate the detailed report and the knowing that we need to be extra careful on Thursdays.
Lock your stuff on Thursdays.
Lock your stuff up.
Well, lock your stuff all the time,
All
but
the
especially on
time.
Thursdays.
Yes. All right. Is there,
I've got a question.
Councilmember Taylor, questions for the Chief? Councilmember?
Yeah.
No,
I've got a
great. Go
question.
ahead.
Yeah. So something that really stood out to me is that 7 of the 10 rape cases were closed as unfounded. I know that cities like Oakland and Berkeley have been criticized for having unfounded rates at like 50%, and here we are at 70%. I know that this is a really small sample size, so it's easy for like outlying cases to skew statistics, but I was just wondering if you could kind of talk about why that number is so high, and I'd also be curious how many of the 6 cases in 2017 were closed as unfounded.
So I don't have the 2017 number, but I can't give you specifics on each case this past year, but this is typically what happens, and this is kind of a statewide trend, unfortunately, in these types of cases. We'll take any rape report, any report of crime that comes to us. We will take it and write it down and log that as a case. But like anything else, we're going to dig and we're going to ask some questions. Generally, we're going to re-interview the victim, and we're going to make sure that we get the story straight regarding participants and possible suspects. In the course of doing those interviews, what typically happens is we can start to see some inconsistencies. There's been some national examples, unfortunately, recently where that happens. Then we'll go compare with maybe other people that saw the participants together earlier in the day or in the evening, then get a statement from the suspect. And eventually we can put 2 and 2 together, and what's very uncomfortable, but we have to do it to get to the bottom line, is to re-interview the victim again and confront them with the inconsistencies and statements from other witnesses or suspects. And then we say, look, it doesn't appear this happened. Are we right? And in these cases, we can get them to confirm, yes, you're correct. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm sorry to say, Councilmember Taylor, it is a trend in that category that is pretty consistent statewide, nationwide.
So do you think that it was a similar rate based on that for last year and the year before? Kind of a...
You know, I don't have that information, and I don't want to presume that it was, but I can check on that and get back to you if you like.
Okay.
But
I'd be curious.
I would lean towards yes, it probably is. Based on my 30-year career, it's unfortunately the trend.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Councilmember Borelli, questions for the Chief on his report? Dennis?
I'm good. I do appreciate you.
Microphone. You're welcome.
I'll just yell louder.
No, microphone.
I do appreciate you you coming forward with all this information. The reported versus now you're reporting what your statistics is reporting everything that has been turned into you, but not necessarily convicted or saw through to the end. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is just the reports to us. You know, a citizen, either through one of those contacts, a call for service, or when we're contacting them, is reporting. And those are only the Part 1 crimes. I'm not including in here like all the narcotics arrests, all the specific times and the specific code sections that we have found guns in the car or guns on subjects when they were arrested, or the drunken public arrests, we'd be here till 1 in the morning. That just, these are, again, I'm focusing on the part one, the top crimes that we report directly to the FBI.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember, Vice Mayor Saragosa. No questions. All right. Chief, would it make sense to a little follow up on the? Of course, we want to be reflecting accurately with our numbers, and with an instance where the number of rapes is skewed, would it make sense to asterisk a statistic like that to show that the department had done the additional investigation? And
I can put that on future reports. Yes, that's easy to do.
Would that be easy to do?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think it's a huge difference in the actual numbers, and it's important to know that the department is taking the necessary steps.
Yeah, as I emphasize, and I'll just say again, we don't just clear these because we kind of think.
No, I understand.
It's, the interviews and any evidence that we do or don't collect. So,
you mentioned, and as we've been going through the cannabis ordinance the past year, and the concerns in the community, both with drugs and alcohol, and I can see your methodology is for what you're reporting to us. Would it be difficult next year to include the narcotics and maybe the DUIs so that we can get a feel for the impact that has in our community and on the department?
I know we can get the DUIs and break them down. I'll double check on the narcotics.
Yeah, I know it could be a broad spectrum in today's world of substance
because
abuse.
a lot of those crimes we don't arrest for any longer.
Yeah.
But I'll see what I can do on that.
I think it would be helpful.
I would agree with you. That's useful information.
Yeah. It's important to understand that, no pun intended, the health of the community and the issues that we face. All right, well, I'm going to ask if there's any member of the public that wishes to address the council on the 2018 report from Chief Ortega. Seeing no one approaching the podium. All right, we will move on now. And item 4, closed session report. Mr. Driscoll, do we have anything to report?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Tonight in closed session, the council rejected the liability claim of Denise Sambucetti with a unanimous 5-0 vote. The council did not take reportable action on the other items on the closed session agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Driscoll. Now, at this hour, we will move for adoption of the agenda. Could I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Seconded by Vice Mayor Saragosa. It's, moved by Councilmember Borelli. Ceremonial matters, none this evening. This brings us to item 7.1, written communications. Any written communications this evening, Mr. Morris?
No.
Thank you, sir. And oral communication. This is the opportunity for the public to address the council on any item that is not on this evening's agenda. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes and limit your subject matter to items that are pertinent to the business of the city council. Is there any member of the public wishing to address the council on a non-agendized item? Please approach the podium and state your name for the record.
Marion Washburn, good evening once again. My topic is related to the last one that I was speaking to. A few months ago, I was grateful and heartened to see that Mr. Morris had launched a proposed ordinance on vegetation management, and as the fire season is approaching, I thought it's really great to see the city taking a proactive approach. And so, of course, I've been breathlessly waiting each week to see what's the status on that. And I looked at the agenda for this week and upcoming items at the end of the agenda and didn't see it yet. So I'm here pleading basically for the city residents to be able to know what the status at this point is on that ordinance. As I talk to people around town, I think everyone shares my unease about what's going to happen this summer with the dry vegetation and the circumstances of the last fall. And people are encouraged definitely to think that the city is taking this on, but I know an ordinance takes quite a long time to process, get public information and feedback, and I imagine there'll be some controversial aspects to it, so that's not going to go quickly necessarily. So I'm here to express my hope that the City Council gives updates if you're not ready to float an approved version right away, and I understand you're waiting maybe for the county to finalize to some extent their ordinance, but nonetheless, I think it's such an important topic. Everybody wants to see the town not burn up, and that includes themselves. I don't wish to burn up this summer either, and I see this ordinance as something that could certainly help us all in that regard. So we're hoping for action out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Appreciate the friendly reminder. Is there anyone else wish to address the council this evening on a non-agendized item?
Sue Rodman, a little bit of a similar topic to Marion's. Since the city is currently working on a fire-safe ordinance, now would be a good time to bring up the problem of communications. When normal communications fail, as they did in Paradise, what is the backup for Placerville? Maybe we need to get the siren on the bell tower functional. Seems to me that that siren would be the least expensive option and would be effective to alert people. When the power is out, it's very quiet, and everyone will hear that siren. But for the siren to be effective, people need to know the answers to a few questions. What are the criteria, and who will be responsible for pushing the button? What will it mean for Placerville residents when that siren goes off? Turn on the TV? Well, not if the power is out. Wait for instructions? From who? Or look for the flames? Evacuate? What route to take? The best route probably depends on the direction of the fire spread. It could also depend on the gridlock on Highway 50. How will we know? Shelter in place? And that may depend on how good your defensible space is. I know it's raining, but now is the time to work on your defensible space. I'm already working on mine. How about you?
Thank you, Sue. The siren has been mentioned before. Anyone else wishing to address the council on an item that is not on this evening's agenda? Good evening again.
Hi. I just have a kind of a more personal question. I don't know how much this pertains to City Council, but I assume it does. Where I live, we're at the corner of Dimity Lane and Mosquito Road, and I understand that Mosquito Road is kind of like a main thoroughfare. Lots of cars go through all day long down that road. But it is a three-way stop sign, and it is a neighborhood, and the speed limit, I believe, is 30, and people run that stop sign constantly. We sit on our porch in the summertime, and we can count up to 10 or more cars that literally roll on through, and some of them speed through, and some of them kind of roll to a stop and then take off really fast, forgetting that they're in a neighborhood. So I don't know what can be done, if anything, but the first thing that came to my mind is I used to live in Santa Cruz for a while, and in small cities like that are heavily populated by people by foot, they have speed bumps in neighborhoods everywhere, which actually are effective. From what I recall, as a driver myself, you have to slow down for a speed bump or you wreck your car. So I was just wondering if that's something that's even possibly considerable for a corner like that, because it is a residential corner, despite the fact that cars go through there all day long. So just a thought.
Thank you for your concerns. I know the chief is making note of the fact that we'll add that to our list of intersections that traffic enforcement would be an improvement on. And the speed bump policy is under reconstruction, as I recall.
Mayor,
Mr. Smith, if you could pull the microphone up, please, so we can hear you.
Just a brief moment.
Sure.
Earlier, I understood that rather than direct our questions to the PG&E representative,
yes, sir,
we were to request are questions to you.
Yes, sir.
But that wasn't addressed, so since there's discussion about management of vegetation, I really would ask you to consider soon adopting an ordinance requiring utilities to do exactly what's on this paper. I will bring you next time you meet photographs of 100 linear feet of Sacramento Hill I would love to clean. If you impose an ordinance on me to clean it, you're running into problems because how can I do it? If you cut those trees or those limbs, you risk cutting power lines. You heard somebody earlier talk about someone who had medical devices that were electrical. Can you imagine the liability risks if a private property owner cuts a limb that breaks a power line or a utility line? So an ordinance establishing these factors for PG&E, Comcast, and AT&T would be appropriate. It's something that can be done right away, and they have the resources. So that's just a suggestion about how we could do something more immediate.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Kurt. They have the resources and they have the responsibility also to maintain their facilities. And you shouldn't have to worry about starting a fire. Anyone else wish to address the council on a non-agendized item this evening? Seeing no one, I'll ask Cleve. Marion has left, but we could still get an answer for what the next step is for the vegetation fire safety ordinance.
We've been working closely with the county because our goal was to have pretty much identical ordinance so that we can perhaps even work with them on the enforcement. We may work with them to perhaps contract and work with them to on how we follow through and enforce that ordinance once we have it in place. So I know that they have a meeting on the 11th, I think, that we talked about earlier. They're getting close, but they're still not quite there. If it's the desire of the council to direct staff to move forward ahead of that, we can attempt to do that. Trying also to hopefully match as close as we can to theirs so that it can be, because we run into that problem of, one house on this side of the city limit, and that's on just outside, that you've got two different standards. Doesn't always work real well. So we'd like to hopefully coincide with that as closely as possible. So, but that's the delay in that we've been waiting to see where the county was going to go with theirs. So
I appreciate the update. Maybe we'll discuss that as a future agenda item a little later on in the meeting. All right, consent calendar. All matters will be considered under one motion in routine unless a member of the City Council requests one of the items to be removed. Is there any item on the consent calendar this evening for removal or discussion? Is there any member of the public that would like to address any of the items or three items on consent calendar this evening? Seeing no one approaching from the audience, is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Borelli, seconded by Councilmember Taylor. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The consent calendar approved unanimously. We'll move on to item 12. If we have no public hearings or ordinances this evening. Item 12.1, adopt a contract with Carnahan Electric for an automatic transfer switch bypass project and approve funding from a couple of various sources. I understand our city engineer has this report this evening. Good evening.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor Cuna, Vice Mayor Zaragoza, and council members. The proposed item before you this evening approves a contract for the work necessary to complete a bypass of the automatic transfer switch, or ATS for short, serving the older portion of the Hangtown Creek Water Reclamation Facility, also known as the wharf. The wharf carries an industrial general permit with the state that requires the facility to have reliable and constant power even in the event of a power failure. The existing ATS serves as a switch for the Detroit generator that acts as the emergency power source to the older portion of the wastewater treatment plant, and it has become unreliable and exceeded its useful service life. Additionally, the existing Detroit generator has developed maintenance concerns. At its last service, coolant was found in the oil, and estimates to troubleshoot and repair the generator were costly. Replacement of the ATS was adopted by council as part of the fiscal year 2017-2018 capital improvement program budget funded through Measure H sales tax funds with an appropriated budget amount of $80,062. Unfortunately, proposals to replace the aged ATS and repair the Detroit generator came in over $163,000, and it was at that time staff looked for other solutions to the problem. When the plant was upgraded back in 2008-2009, a new Caterpillar generator, called the CAT throughout the staff report, was installed to serve as the emergency power source for the newer portions of the facility. At the time, the city received the large generator at a great value and substantial cost savings. The CAT is large enough to serve as the sole emergency backup power for the entire water treatment facility. A viable solution was developed to bypass the unreliable out-of-service ATS by connecting the older portion of the plant to the CAT generator through existing conduits. This would then support the newer and older portions of the plant with just the CAT generator and would allow the CAT generator to be better utilized and would ensure reliable power to the wharf in the event of a power failure. 2 proposals were received for the bypass of the ATS, with the lowest bid coming in at $110,647.24 with Carnahan Electric. Staff's recommendations are summarized in the report before you this evening for the support and approval of the contract with Carnahan Electric. That concludes my verbal report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Is there any questions from the council? Seeing shaking heads up here. Karen, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, just a quick one. And I had mentioned it to Cleve as well, but the 2 contracts were so far apart in the quote by like $200,000, more than $200,000. And usually when that happens is because one party doesn't understand the scope of the work and underestimates how much it's going to cost, and then may, like halfway through the project, add on a bunch of costs, or the other party didn't understand the scope and overestimated. So just wanted to make sure that that's not going to happen with this lower bidder.
Very good. Yeah, that's a bid irregularity. We do see those, and obviously that sends up red flags for me as well. And so when we looked at the proposal that was received, it was odd the way that it was developed, the secondary proposal. It was clear to me that the direction hadn't been clear to them, perhaps. It was for design and the construction, but it was an engineer's estimate of the construction. It was as if it was being treated solely as a design project. We know what the voltage is. We know what the design load is. We don't really need to, and this is kind of ironic coming from an engineer, but we don't really need to over-engineer it. We looked at the 2 bids thoroughly, and we felt comfortable with Carnahan Electric. They're somebody who we do rely upon out at the plant, as well as throughout the city. So we felt confident in their bid.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had the same questions.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. I had one question. If there's no questions over here. Question, what's going to happen to the old Detroit generator?
That is a discussion to occur at a later date with City Manager Morris.
Okay, so that wasn't included in either one of these bids?
No.
Okay, and so, we don't want that thing to become an oil and fuel hazard sitting out there.
Agreed.
So that is not part of this proposed project, though?
It is not at this time.
Will the generator be completely taken offline so that there is no electrical hazard there, so that if a future removal contract is let, you won't be dealing with 480 volt work criteria?
Great question. The answer is yes.
Very good. So at least it'll be isolated and lonely.
Yes, along with the ATS being lonely.
Detroit Diesel.
They'll be lonely together.
Then we'll have to see if we can sell it to a Detroit Diesel fan. Is there? Thank you for that. Is there any member of the public wish to address the council on item 12.1, the improvements out at the wastewater treatment plant? Sue? No? Come on.
Sue Rodman, Measure H&L. Rebecca explained this to us at the last Measure H&L meeting, and I thought, well, this is really good. We're really on the ball, and this is a much more efficient way to go. And it gets us out of an old generator that really should be surplus and gotten rid of, and puts that Caterpillar generator so that it's actually working like it should, and at less cost. So, yay for our engineering department again.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Any other member of the public wish to comment? I'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. The question, the CAT is probably far in much closer compliance to the air quality standards than the Detroit generator.
By far, yes.
So do we get air credits for taking this one out of service, taking the Detroit out of service?
I haven't looked into that yet, but I certainly can.
I know it's been an issue that we've dealt with, in the public works fleet, making sure that the sweeper even was non-compliant for a long time. So, yeah, let's see if we can get some air quality credits.
Sure.
Or at least some recognition, and we are indeed taking an old smoky motor out of service. Does someone like to make a motion?
I'd move that we approve the contract with Carnahan Electric.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Thank you very much. And that plant continues to just be the highlight of our major facilities. Thank you for taking good care of it. Huge investment. Moving on to item 12.2, we're being asked to adopt a resolution, and I believe this is an item that we've discussed partially at our last meeting. This is to buy 3 trucks and some accessories with it, and I believe our interim public works director has the report. Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council. The purpose of this report is to replace three pickup trucks within the Public Works Department that have been taken out of service. On February 12th, 2019, the City Council ordered a capital lease agreement to Opus Bank in the amount of $257,862 for financing of 12 pieces of equipment, including 3 pickup trucks for the Public Works Department. Tonight, staff is recommending that the City Council approve the purchase of 3 pickup trucks, totaling $93,396.25 from Ron Dupratt Ford. Tonight's proposed action would replace 3 pickup trucks that have currently been taken out of service due to various mechanical failures and safety concerns. Due to the age of the vehicles, the cost of repairs would exceed the value of the trucks. The first truck, a 1991 F-150, is the oldest truck in our fleet. It has frequent electrical problems and has developed a severe rear main seal leak, causing great environmental concerns over the oil puddles it was leaving prior to being taken out of service. Staff has determined that given the overall condition of the truck, it's in the city's best interest to spend money on purchasing a new truck as opposed to trying to repair this old one. The second truck is a 1997 F-250. It has been red tagged and taken out of service due to a damaged engine. And the third truck is another 1997 F-250, but it was equipped with a lift gate. The lift gate was taken out of service due to failure. The cables and pulleys that operate the gate were starting to fail due to the age and normal wear and tear. It was a potential safety hazard due to the unreliability of the gate and the weight of the equipment that it was frequently used to load and unload into the truck. The California Department of General Service Procurement Division provides purchasing services for local agencies. Local agencies are able to take advantage of quantities of scale by taking part in a statewide bid for vehicles, equipment, and other services. Taking part in this service ensures that small cities receive the best possible public purchase price from reputable businesses located throughout California. It is staff's intent to take advantage of this service for the vehicles that cannot be purchased for the same or lower price locally. The recommended purchases meet this condition. And the total cost for the purchase of these 3 trucks from Ron Pratt Ford is going to be $93,396.25. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Nick. Any questions on the purchase of these 3 trucks? Any member of the public wish to address the council on this item? Seeing no one approaching the podium, bring it back to the council for action.
I'll move resolution to approve the purchase of the 3 Ford trucks.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Stone. And thank you, Mr. Warren, for your help in procuring the funding for these much-needed trucks. Item 12.3, direct staff to execute an agreement, to execute an amendment to 2 street frontage improvement agreements for a property located at 7467 Green Valley Road. Mrs. Neves, do you have the report on this item?
I do. Good evening. The proposed item before you seeks direction to execute an amendment to the existing street frontage improvement agreements, SFIAs for short, for the property located at 7476 Green Valley Road, identified as Assessor's Parcel Number 325-12028. Section 8-9-3 of the City Code requires the construction of curbs, gutters, and sidewalks and street widening along the street frontage of all properties within the city in conjunction with certain types of development projects, applications, or the construction of building improvements on those properties. However, Section 8-9-4 of the City Code does allow for deferral of those street frontage improvements through the use of the Street Frontage Improvement Agreement. The property owners at 7476 Green Valley Road submitted for a lot line adjustment, LLA 1802, between parcels 325-120-28, or as I'll refer to from now on, parcel 28, and 325-120-30, or parcel 30. Parcel 28 holds 2 existing SFIAs, one for the frontage on Green Valley Road and one for the frontage on Winter Lane. While parcel 30 is undeveloped and an SFIA does not currently exist. When that parcel does develop, they'll come in for an application and an SFIA will likely be administered as well. The lot line adjustment increases the frontage length on parcel 28 for both Green Valley Road and Winter Lane, thus necessitating the amendment to the existing SFIAs for each frontage and is the subject before you under this item this evening. Staff is requesting direction to execute the amendments and record said amendments with the El Dorado County Office of the Recorder. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions for our staff? None at this moment. Is there any member of the public that would wish to address the council on item 12.3, 7476 Green Valley Road? Seeing no one approaching the podium, I will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for questions or potential action.
Is this, because of all the rain and everything.
Did you get a map?
I don't have that, no. I don't know what
Take this
happened.
map.
Okay.
I have a map.
Is this the current veterinary office that's out
Yes,
there
it
now?
is.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought, okay.
And this is a process that has been generated by the fact that they're doing a boundary line adjustment.
Yes.
So this is kind of a, if you could say, a self-imposed, if you will, condition of that process. So the street frontage, you're just adjusting the dimensions of the
Yes.
street frontage to match the new parcel configurations.
Yes, they've shifted the boundary line, south.
Mm-hmm.
And doing so enlarged or lengthened the frontage on Green Valley Road, which is at the more public-facing frontage, and then Winter Lane, which is towards the east of the parcel, east side of the parcel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rebecca, I just handed out the map. I apologize. I meant to do that at the beginning of this.
That's all right. It's been
That
raining.
shows the dotted line shows where that property was expanded to, and hence requiring the amendment to the SFIA. So,
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Oh. Just to be clear, we are not calling this in. We are not, I think we're all very sensitive to making sure that we're not building sidewalks to nowhere. That's kind of a famous line. These street frontage improvement agreements can sometimes create that concept.
Well, we just had that across the street, remember? When we talked about the fellow.
Yeah, then we have the property owner up on Mallard that came before this council, I believe, in January of 2018. We had called in that street frontage. That's called in, and they have neglected to perform. Mr. City Attorney.
First time up? refer to that.
Yeah, and that actually would be a useful connection, a sidewalk right next door to the Boys and Girls Club.
Right, yeah. And that's,
We have a big hole there, and folks coming over from on Mallard Lane neighborhood could benefit from that sidewalk. So we need to look into that. That's a separate item than this. Is there someone interested in making a motion?
I'll move to direct staff to execute the 2 amendments.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Taylor, seconded by Councilmember Borelli. If there's no other questions, do we have to do a roll call vote on this? Let's do a roll call vote.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. And that's a very nice parcel, and I would hope that someday soon we would see a development project out there. It's just a nice spot, now that we've got the road fixed. All right, moving on to item 12.4. Turning the page. Now we're moving up to Broadway. Approve a placement of a demand upon the current owner of property located at 1900 Broadway for the performance pursuant to executing a street frontage improvement agreement, SF31. Mrs. Neves, yet again.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Thank you. This demand would be placed upon the current owner of the property located at 1900 Broadway for the construction of the concrete curb, gutter, and sidewalks. In 1978, City Council approved the original street frontage improvement agreement as required by the City Code 8-9-3 as a condition of approval on a construction of a gymnasium at the subject property. City staff has long identified the need for construction of contiguous pedestrian and bicycle facilities within the Broadway corridor in the interest of public safety. In 2014, staff submitted an application and approval of funding through the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program for the Upper Broadway Bike Lanes project, and subsequently received funding through the Active Transportation Program for the Added Pedestrian Connection project. This project will improve the active transportation connectivity within Broadway from Schnell School Road to Point View Drive. The city's project has necessitated the need to place the demand for this parcel. In review of the project scope, there is a potential for the project will be able to fund the construction, not the design, of the SFIA improvements as part of the Upper Broadway Bike Lanes project. And due to economies of scale, it makes more sense to include these improvements as part of the city's project. Therefore, the demand is requested this time is in the amount of $8,100 to cover engineering design costs only. Should coverage of the construction costs be needed in the future, that demand would be brought to council at a later date. All the project funding sources carry aggressive delivery timelines. The right-of-way phase is nearing completion, and the milestone schedule for this project shows design being finalized in June of this year, bidding fall of this year, construction starting in spring of 2020, and construction concluding in 2020. As these milestones approach, staff will be commencing with public outreach to the community, especially to the impacted parcels and business within the project limits. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I believe we had a very similar situation at our last meeting where we're calling in just the engineering portion of the project, not the construction costs.
Yes, sir.
But
Correct.
retaining the right to call that in at a
Yes.
future date. And hopefully we won't, because we're being very successful getting some outside funding for this. Are there any questions for our city engineer before I ask for public comment? All right, thank you. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the council on item 12.4, which deals with 1900 Broadway? If you could please approach the podium and state your name for the record. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor.
Maybe pull the microphone up. There we go.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Burgess. I'm on the school board that this property represents. Couple quick questions. So the $8,000 for design, when this demand comes down, is this pay all at once? Is this
If you
pay over
would,
time?
if you could address your comments to us, and then
Sorry.
we'll get, that's okay. We'll get city staff to answer them for you after, see if anybody else wants to speak.
So my questions are concerning we receive a demand for this. Do we have to pay it immediately? Is it paid over time? What is the procedure there?
Okay.
And then we also received a letter talking about actual construction costs of the curb and gutter. Same question.
Okay.
Is that all paid at once, paid over time? And then I guess one last question and comment on all this. Is any part of the construction of this, driven by the existence of the upper room, or is this just a project that's been needing to happen anyway?
That's a very good question.
If it's being driven by the existence of the upper room, then my next question is, what's been done about looking into possibly moving the upper room to a place that's more convenient for the customers? So those are my questions for now.
Thank you very much. I'll get the answer for you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Is there any other member of the public wishing to address the council on the item 12.4?
My name is Gail Norton. I am the current principal there. I think I was born in 1979. I do want to thank you for doing that, putting a sidewalk in there. I drive that road every morning and afternoon, and I've had members of the community jumping out in front of me, or it's dark along the way. So do approve of it. We do have these questions that we need to have resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the council? Seeing no one approaching the podium, I will close public comment on this item, and we will get some answers here. So the question was regarding the method of payment, and it would be involved for not only the engineering dollars, but also if construction dollars were needed. Rebecca, are you going to handle that? Perhaps Mr. Morris?
I'll just throw this out that they're a good partner in the community.
Absolutely.
We want to work with them. If there's, our goal would be to have it once we start the design work. Obviously, we've already started some of that, but so our goal would be to have it as soon as possible on the design part of that. But we would be willing to work with them if there's some need to pay it over I would say a shorter period of time. That is something that we could work with you on. Between the engineer, our finance director, and myself, we could talk to you about that and see what might be feasible for them. And I think regarding the construction, we hope that we're going to be able to fund the construction, and we did receive some other funding, right, that's going to help us on that. So we think we're pretty good there. We won't know for sure until bids come in, obviously. So we think we're okay there, but I think that offer would extend to the construction funding. If we had to come back to you for some of that we could look at it over probably a shorter period of time, but over a period of time anyway. So we would be able to work with you on that. So.
All right. So it seems though the answer would be traditionally they are lump sum payments, but given the situation, we'll be certainly working with you. Rebecca, just again, when would you expect this engineering work to begin? And this money would become due?
As City Manager Morris accurately stated, design work is actually already well underway. We've actually almost finished right-of-way. We've made great progress on this project. And also, as City Manager Morris correctly stated, we did receive some additional construction funding. So we are very hopeful that the construction funding that we have for the project would pay for those improvements as well, since the project did necessitate the demand at this time. The other thing too, there was the last question was the construction project driven by the existence of the upper room? And the answer to that was no. We did go through quite an extensive amount of public outreach, and we had some public meetings, and it came down to a lot of residents actually showed up to the public meetings and requested specifically the pedestrian connection project. You may recall we applied for CMAQ funding in 2016 and were not successful in getting it. We applied for 2017 ATP funds and did not get it until SB1 was approved, and we received the ATP augmentation funds on the project. So it's been on as a public comment response to put a pedestrian connection component as part of the project, and we were successful in getting that funded through design and then ultimately also construction through a couple of sources. There's quite a need up there, as the gentleman stated.
All right. Thank you very much. Councilmember Borelli, did you want to comment on the?
No, I'm agreeing with everything Rebecca said. We have had numerous meetings and numerous people come before us and, actually beg for sidewalks up there. So.
I think for Patty and myself, for at least 12 years, we've been working. This has been identified as a real safety issue for the pedestrians from And this is the upper part of this whole Broadway project. The lower part down near the business districts is in a different schedule. And so you're going to see tremendous improvements along a long stretch of Broadway for pedestrian safety as well as bike and what have you. So it has no connection to the current upper room, although your comment is well noted that it does seem to be in need of some attention. So with that, is there a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. A roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your patience this evening. We didn't anticipate, well, maybe we should have anticipated it with PG&E in the room. It could go a little long. So, but thank you for working with us on this project, which takes us on to your neighbor, item 12.5, similar request at 1700 Broadway for execution of part of the street frontage improvement. City Engineer Neves.
Thank you. And in the interest of the evening hour, I will state that this item before you is virtually identical to the previous item, although this applies to 1700 Broadway. And the original street frontage improvement agreement was approved by council in 2013. The amount that's requested based off of the frontage calculation within the street frontage improvement agreement, puts the engineering cost at $15,100. And then the overall construction cost was, if I recall, it's 41. The total cost to design and construct was $41,500. So at this time, we are only requesting the design funds because, again, we have a pretty good sense that the construction funding will pay for this improvement as well. And with the same project milestones, construction starting next year. And that concludes my report, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much. And this is the parcel where Hangtown Haven was located, is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. So it's helping the council members get their bearings as to what part of Broadway we're at. So we're just up past the old motel. Any questions for staff?
Just a quick, I'm sure we're probably in the same spot, but are we into the process here as well in terms of the original planning, or I'll have to get the right word. Design.
Yes.
Design.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions right now? All right. Any member of the public wishing to address the council on item 12.5?
Good evening. My name's Barry Wilkinson, and our family owns 1700 Broadway. I've just got a couple of quick questions for you here. Number one, is the construction of the sidewalk going to be consistent along Broadway from Schnell School all the way? Are you requiring every property owner to participate in this project? Number two, the fact that we're general contractors, is there the option of the owner of the property to negotiate contracts and the possibility of saving money by having the actual construction work done by somebody other than that has been designated by the city? And my third point is the city seeking reimbursement funds from the state entities, excuse me, to get reimbursed on these construction costs, at which time would the owners have the ability to get reimbursed on any of this work if the state comes in at a different time and reimburses the city for the work being done, if you can catch my drift.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let me see if we get those questions answered for you. I'm sure we can. Let me see if, do you have any other comments?
I think that's,
Mr. Wilkinson?
I think that's it.
All right, appreciate you sitting through the long meeting this evening. Any other member of the public wishing to address the council on 12.5?
I'm just curious, if you're going to add a bike path underneath the bypass down Jack here to meet up with the bike path. As a school, we often head to that bike path, but there's no safety walk along Jack Ear Road, no pathway there that's designated for walking. We have to walk on the side of the road or something. Just curious if the council is going to add that direction too.
We'll see if we can get that answered. Any other comments from the public on item 12.5? Seeing no one else approaching the podium, I will close public comment on this item and ask either Mr. Morris or our city engineer to answer Mr. Wilkinson's questions.
The question was, is the construction consistent on Broadway? Are we requiring every property owner to participate? In the event of the property having an SFIA on it, yes. We have one more SFIA probably coming at the next meeting too. We were working out some negotiating pieces on it this last week. There was it was that particular SFIA happened to be the second one that the city had ever written. So there was a couple of little language gaps that Mr. Driscoll and I worked our way through. But the answer is yes, we are requiring them all to participate.
That one's written in Latin then, if it's that whole
It was
bunch.
interesting.
Yeah.
We were amused for about 5 seconds. And then the second question.
Rebecca,
Yes, sir.
I want to emphasize, we are requiring that of every parcel that we have an SFIA on. If they do not have those, we have no trigger to be able to require that of them.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, he's correct.
Okay, so that answers Mr. Wilkinson's first question. Then his second was about his ability as a licensed contractor, which I'm well familiar with his reputation in the community, to do, I call it self-contracting, to do his own concrete work.
Yeah, I mean, there's that option in the code. The agreement is merely the deferral, and it is a helpful tool in that oftentimes we run across property owners who are not licensed contractors, and so this mechanism is actually kind of a little bit of a convenience for the property owner too, because this is what we do. We do public projects, and so there is the option that he could negotiate his own contract in the interest of saving money.
Very good. So he can do his own concrete work, absolutely one of his rights. And then the last question was regarding the city receiving state funding for this work.
As far as receiving state funding, I want to, the project is described and defined in the programmed funding sources, meaning this is what we're given this money to put in a bike lane and a pedestrian connection facility on Broadway. As far as seeking reimbursement from those funds, we do build, invoice, and receive reimbursement from the state on those grounds. And if I'm forgetting anything, Mr. Warren, please feel free to step in. And as far as the owner being reimbursed, they would not be reimbursed for the work performed because this is a requirement as a condition of approval on the property, unfortunately.
Okay. But if we are successful in obtaining state funding, as currently it looks like we're on track to do,
yes.
The property owners would be responsible for their share of the engineering work.
Only.
Then we go into the construction phase, and hopefully no additional funding is needed. And at the completion of the project, then these agreements will be considered fulfilled, correct, Mr. Driscoll? So this street frontage improvement agreement will go away for both properties that we're discussing this evening. And we would go to construction when?
Next year.
Next year.
Yes, sir.
So, okay. Time to get this all worked out. So I guess that would kind of be a secondary answer, Barry, to your question. Is that the balance of the agreement goes away, it's gone. So that's always a good thing. Oh, all right. Did we answer your questions? Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience. If there are...
There's one more question.
Oh, excuse me, the Jakeway Road question.
Yes. And I believe the gentleman's name was Gail Norton. Is that correct? Thank you, Gail. Regarding the bike path connection at Jakeway, Point View Drive, we are doing intersection improvements up in that area. We are obtaining Caltrans encroachment permits to do some of the intersection improvements up in that area. There is a planned development up there that is helping us provide part of the frontage connection. It's the hotel. And so that we got to a point where we ended our commitment at the beginning of their commitment.
Okay, so there is progress.
Yes.
I mean, so there is a intelligent effort being put forward to make that happen as these projects build out.
Yes, sir.
That's excellent. I mean, much better than no, we've never looked at it. It won't happen in 10 years. So a little bit of good news. Probably not soon enough, but at least it's being well thought through. So thank you for those questions. Is there someone that would like to make a motion if there's no other discussion on this?
I'll move to adopt the resolution to approve the placement of demand at 1700 Broadway.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilmember Taylor. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you again for your time this evening. We will move on to item 12.6. This adoption of resolutions never ends. Approving a contract with our familiar REY engineering firm. Let's see, we've got a notice to proceed, number 3 and 4. Mrs. Neves, could we have your staff report, please?
Yes, sir. The item before you approves amendment number 2 in the amount of $29,222 and grants permission to staff to issue the notice to proceed number 3 and 4 with REY for the Broadway Sidewalks project and the associated budget appropriations. The Broadway Sidewalk project will improve sidewalk connectivity within the Broadway corridor by creating a continuous path of travel for pedestrians from Mosquito Road to Schnell School Road. There is a project exhibit directly back on that wall just behind the chief. And the city did apply for and successfully received Highway Safety Improvement Program funding for the environmental clearance, design, and construction of the project. HSIP funds provides approximately 90% of the project's funding. In May of 2018, Council approved the consulting services agreement with REY in the amount of $119,844 for environmental and design services of the said project, with a limited notice to proceed number 1 in the amount of $59,630. At the January 22nd, 2019 meeting, Council approved a no-cost amendment number 1 and notice to proceed number 2 to REY's contract to complete additional environmental technical studies requested by Caltrans. To date, the project has been environmentally cleared and is proceeding into design. The final project funding source lends itself to an aggressive delivery schedule. The milestone schedule for the project shows design being finalized in May of this year, bidding in July, August of this year, and construction starting in September of this year and concluding in November of this year. So this one's a busy one. As these milestones approach, staff will be commencing with public outreach to the community, especially to the impacted parcels and businesses within the project limits. Staff's recommendations are outlined in the report before you this evening. And that concludes my report. Happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much. Always love to see notices to proceed. Those are always a positive steps. Is there any questions for our city engineer on this item? We're clawing our way through. We're getting there.
I do have one.
Yes, sir.
I noticed that there was a potential for a transit stop.
I think that's been removed, hasn't it?
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the transit stop that's originally in the exhibit has been removed from the project at the mutual request of the city and transit.
And did it include that little piece of sidewalk going in there too?
It did, and it ended up being, just because of available right-of-way space, they were going to be placed in city right-of-way, and the monument is right there. And so we kind of had to move it a little bit more west, which elongated the sidewalk. And one of the concerns that we had is the transit users won't likely walk that extra length to the intersection and cross appropriately, but would be doing illegal crossings across Broadway, which is not a safe scenario for anybody. And between that and a few other discussions, it was best to just not pursue that at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Good question. Any other questions before I ask for public comment? All right, I will open this item for public comment. Item 12.6. Does any member of the public wish to address the council?
Sue Rodman, Measure L, we're glad to contribute $10,000 to get this going. It's a good project.
Thank you, Sue. We appreciate your constant dedication for the Measure H&L Committee.
Contribution.
There's an awful lot of funding sources, and it is important that we make sure that it's all very clear. Any other member of the public wish to address the council on item 12.6? Standing by.
I apologize, but I'm going to need to recuse myself as I have property within a proximity of this project that would preclude me from dealing with it, so I'll
To the kitchen. Back to the room.
Go back to your room.
We should shut the lights off back there. PG&E struck again. All right, well, this seems like a little odd at this point, but if Mr. Driscoll is comfortable, we will proceed then. Is there any, I've opened and closed the item. We've heard from Sue Rodman in the Measure Ale Committee. Any council member comments? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
Move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. A roll call vote, please.
Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Zaragoza?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. And now I should note for the record that Councilmember Thomas left the room because he declared a conflict of interest as a property owner in the project area. Okay, moving on to item 13. Can somebody
call him back?
Yeah, let's get Councilmember
That was
Thomas.
a quick exit.
I'd just like to say that this whole Broadway sidewalk project and the path there, I can hardly wait till it's all finished.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's just going to be terrific. It's just going to improve that area so much.
It's been a tremendous amount of pieces. There's no doubt about that. All right, moving on to item 13. Thank you, staff, for all the previous work. Good evening, Sue. Thanks for your input. El Dorado County Transit Authority. Let's see, we met. Have we met since then? No, we haven't. So the only big news was, sadly, Executive Director Mindy Jackson is still going to retire, but
Yeah, she hasn't
on May
changed
the 3rd, so we're all looking forward to wishing her well. El Dorado County Transportation Commission, Vice Mayor Zaragoza.
Nothing new. We haven't met
We
yet.
haven't met.
Yep.
Oh, okay, and LAFCO, we meet tomorrow night. Anyone that's interested in going, it's always an exciting evening. SACOG, Vice Mayor Zaragoza.
Yes, we did meet, and I think I'm not sure if everyone should have gotten the email. So for next week on March 7th, there will be a hearing here in Placerville at the El Dorado Emergency Operations Center, and that's going to be a briefing for local government, city council, and board of supervisors, as well as from the whole region will be invited to go over the MTP SCS, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Sustainable Communities Strategy, and for all of our transportation projects that we have will have to be in that plan, and so you will get a briefing over the entire region on that, and that is 11:30 to 12:30 on Thursday, March 7th. As to the meeting, we had a presentation from the Bay Area Council, Jim Wonderman, really talking about the inflow and outflow of traffic out of the greater Sacramento and North San Joaquin areas into the Bay, and then really how we keep those people here. And bring the businesses to this region so that we're not having this outflow going out that direction, even though we do need to fix all those transportation corridors as well. And one of the things that came up that I thought was interesting was Google came to Sacramento about 3 years ago and was looking to establish a fairly large facility here, but when they came to look and they talked to their employees, it was really our transportation system that was sorely lacking, especially our public transportation system, which some of their younger workers use quite a bit, and so they ended up going elsewhere. And so really the the underlying notion there is until we fix some of those things, we may still lose out on some of those tech firms, besides 30 years ago having Intel down in Folsom. So it was sort of an interesting conversation that we had. We also went over some of the, and we'll probably see this next week as well, which would be some of the ideas in terms of how to improve our traffic flow throughout this regions. Everything from HOV lanes, from toll lanes, from switchable lanes. And so we have a map that shows where some of these could be happening. I think there's still some disagreement between Caltrans and maybe some of the municipalities about that. Certainly we suffer on this on Highway 50 because we're judged on our residential commute as opposed to the amount of all traffic that comes through. Like they do on other highways.
And I was going to just say that this is so important to us because those are all the things that, we've been talking about in our hotspot, so this is really something very important to us.
Absolutely. I'm sure they'll go over all this again on Thursday, but just did want to mention that in case anyone doesn't make it. So I think that's about it.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, this meeting is before transit and transportation, so so we.
Excellent. Mayor, can I just ask? Did all of you receive that invitation to the March? Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. 2x2. Councilmember Thomas. I think we need to schedule another one.
We do. We haven't met.
We haven't met, so Cliff, we need to talk about setting up that next meeting.
Right. I think we had a date, didn't we, that we came up with at the last meeting? Or no, we're supposed to.
No.
Okay,
We'll
we'll work on it.
So.
I think it was within 30 days, and then we were trying to see what that looked like, but no.
Yep. All right. So item 14, request for future agenda items. I had perhaps two. One, I would like to request staff bring us back a brief update on the Clay Street project. I think it's important that the community know where that project is. I know the environmental document is very detailed, so just a little overview as to where that's at your convenience. The other thing is Marion Washburn brought up, we did have the community workshop for the fire safe and the vegetation management ordinance, and then she brought up the point that the clock is literally ticking. What's the council's thoughts on what our next step should be? I mean, that was really well attended.
I really talked to Cleve about this when I met with him prior to our meeting, and because Marion had talked to me about it, and we also talked about it at the Fire Safe Council meeting. But I agree with Cleve that since we're in such close proximity with the county, that we kind of need to. But I would like to do something to make sure that they're, if we could push them along and tell them how crucial this is to us, and we're really, wanting to make this.
Yeah, in your opinion, is the county moving forward with this?
They are, like I say, they have their vegetation management meetings with their stakeholders set up for the 11th. I would hope, and I think that they're going to be pretty close to presenting a draft at that meeting. This will be the second one of those that they've held, and I attended the last one, and I think they got some good feedback, and we're pretty much ready to start drafting something. So I'm hoping maybe they'll have a draft at that meeting. I can follow up with Creighton and find out.
I would be remiss if we didn't have something prior to the time in which people are really going to be needing to do the abatement, like Sue Robbins said, she's already working on
exactly.
it. There's that window of time where it's a good idea to work on it, and then it rapidly goes to where it's not recommended to do that type of yard work. So
I think what Cleve said too, that maybe we could start working on our own. And
well, I think that I agree with the idea that as the county moves forward and develops theirs, I think that they are being mindful of how they want to do it, and would incorporate a lot of what we need to do here in the city.
Right, and that's why I'm thinking maybe we could start our own and then incorporate, like you say, when they.
No, I think the idea is to have the county move forward with theirs.
I mean that, If they're not moving forward.
But if they're not moving forward, I mean, we should really have this done by
Now.
April, or I mean,
Now.
now ideally, but it's March, like next week,
Next
this
week.
Saturday or Friday. So, you know, we could, I don't know, what do you guys think? Would it be feasible to pass our own ordinance and then make amendments based on what the county comes up with if they're?
Well, maybe not even go that far as to pass it, but to start
Just as
working
a-
on it. And,
Let me throw out a couple
plan?
things. And I appreciate your enthusiasm to move this forward more timely. One, we could set up our own start to set up our own timetable, knowing that the county's meeting on the 11th. But we know what our Tuesdays are and what we need to schedule, so that we need to have our own public input for what regarding the ordinance, just not the informational workshop that we've had. So we need to set up a day and start advertising now to when we're going to engage our citizens with their concerns. The other thought that I'd had earlier this year, before we kind of knew that the county was going to go into this full bore, was just on an interim basis, just for this fire season, to adopt CAL FIRE's regulations and just put them in as a blanket over the city this year, so that we had a clear, enforceable set of criteria. And there's a state code number for the state resource code number for it, but that would at least give us something more than our current little couple of lines that are in our 1954 section of our code book that says, "Thou shalt not have a weedy lot." You know, that's about as forcible as it is right now. So there's been a lot of changes in the world since weeds and trash were first conceived in city code. So,
Just a reminder, we don't really have to adopt CAL FIRES or the state code, because that is in enforce. It's a state code that is in enforce.
you know, and I
We could
appreciate you
we could
saying that,
enforce
but
I would
my
just say
interactions.
that, before we go any, I mean, we haven't really agendized.
Yeah, we
it,
should
So we
agendize.
should probably.
So, thank you. But that's why he's the vice mayor. Would the council like to agendize this for their second meeting in March? We've probably already got us spending money at our next meeting. See, there's the whole issue of, now we're at the spigot could shut off at any moment. No one knows.
You know, this is not while we think it's a sprint, it's not necessarily a sprint. We have codes in place that we could enforce now, and I think we'd be better to spend the time to get an ordinance that is meaningful, and so putting it off till the end of March to revisit it is my opinion, and to the second meeting in March to just at least discuss where the county is and where we're going.
If I might just comment, the draft ordinance that I saw a while back needed a lot of legal review. And I have not done that because I'm waiting to see what the county comes out with. And until they come out with something and it goes through their county council's review, we're not going to really have much there to hang our hat on. And it's going to take some time to do it, because the ordinance needed a lot of work the last time I saw it.
So reviewing, just putting this at the end of the next agenda to determine whether we want to have it then.
I'm saying you can put it on there, but whether or not you're going to have something that is ready to present to the public and has been thoroughly reviewed, I can't assure you of that.
So,
I would just say that we would ask for it to be put on the agenda for a future meeting, and I think probably leave it there for now, before we go into further discussion on an issue that's not agendized.
Sure. Well, the purpose of this moment
what
is to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we need consensus of the council on both items. Was there consensus on an update for the Clay Street project
I'm in agreement.
for the end of March? And then consensus to direct staff to develop at the earliest practical time an item to address the vegetation fire safety.
I don't think that should be on the next agenda.
No, I'm not suggesting the next agenda. When staff would feel comfortable bringing it forward.
Okay.
But recognizing that it's
But
more.
this is future agenda items.
Yes, it is, sir.
Okay, just
for-
really future.
It could be, yeah, it's up to the city manager to determine.
I'll tell you what I would like is that, and this was brought up, there's a lot of folks that were at the council meeting in the audience. They want to know where we are in enforcement. And so maybe we could just, if you could find that out, just
how much enforcement do we have to require people to,
And because everybody's concerned about that, and it's a really big issue, and
In the future. In the future. Using the existing ordinances.
yeah.
And the county fire district, who is paid to do weed enforcement for us.
We can get back to you on that.
Yeah, yeah, that's not serious. We can get that done. All right.
So,
City
we're-
ma-
so we agreed that we're going to have a report coming back to us on our existing
yeah,
fire
enforcement.
enforcement. Okay. Good meeting. All right.
All right. City manager and staff reports?
Nothing? I just have one item, and I'm going to look at the chief because he's going to raise his eyebrows when I tell him this, but I'm going to apologize to the council. We have EOC training tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, correct, chief? At county EOC, which is at the basement of the, below the Board of Supervisors room. I did not follow up. I noticed that my weekly update on February 4th, I sent that to all of the council and notified them of that date, but I should have followed up with you, and that's when I asked you to set the date and asked you to do the training. If you remember right, there was a link to some training that you can do. So I apologize. I shouldn't have just left it in that report. I should have gone beyond that. So I apologize. We are holding that. If any of you can make it, you're definitely invited, but I know this is extremely short notice. Councilmember Taylor and I discussed it, and she's going to be there for 2 hours tomorrow, which
Awesome.
she can only make the first 2 hours.
We'll have her run a
But-
tabletop exercise.
Yeah, right.
Excellent, excellent.
I understand that, and I apologize, Chief, and I should have followed up with the council, but we will reschedule another one, but I just wanted to let you know that and apologize from my perspective, so.
For coffee and donut count, who intends to be there for the?
Well, now Dennis is going to show up.
I know these guys are. But of the council, if I could ask, who plans to be there?
Unfortunately, I have a conflict.
Patty?
I'm going to try.
Okay. Dennis, yes? Okay. Michael? Okay.
Apologize.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Taylor will have to carry the load. Tabletop
She can eat
exercise.
all our donuts and drink all our coffee.
I don't think she'll eat donuts.
Save me a cruller.
All right. Upcoming items. There's no other staff reports. Let's see, items we have scheduled for our March 12th meeting: Spring Street emergency repair, contract ratification, Clay Street contract amendment, Upper Broadway bike lane, Pacific Street closeout, Ray Lawyer Drive paving contract, and Upper Broadway bike lanes REY contract amendment. So, being no other agendized business, I will go ahead and adjourn our meeting until our next regularly scheduled meeting on the 12th of March, 5:30 closed session. Thank you very much, and good night.